Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. I am the host of the show. I hope you guys are doing okay this morning. Early, yes. I was up late last night doing the news, so yeah, I am dragging ass a little bit this morning. It is okay though. We are going to get through it together. Look, if you guys dig the content, give it a like, share it. Definitely subscribe. Also, make sure you hit the notification bell. My objective is 40,000, at least by Christmas. That is the goal. I need you guys to help me with that goal. So definitely share it far and wide. Give it to your mama, aunt, grandma, uncle, cousin Lily, all of those people. Let them hear this voice. But I have a damn good show today. Scotty Nell Hughes is going to be here. We're going to have a conversation about some of the things, the fallout from Joe Biden effectively calling a third of the American public, 100 million people, trash. Or to be specific, garbage. They're trying to say he didn't say it. Whatever. He totally said it. So there's that. Esteban Cillo, he's going to be here. And I butchered that last name, fair enough. But he's going to be here at the 9 o'clock hour. He's going to give us a heads up of what's taking place on the ground in the Middle East. And we have Daniel Lazar. And I am happy to have Daniel Lazar because he's going to go over some of the information associated with what looked like a color revolution trying to take place in Georgia. People have basically gone home, but it looked pretty bad for a little while out there. So I want to get started. Fallout. Let's talk about fallout. When Hillary Clinton called Donald Trump supporters deplorables, that didn't really go over well. And you had the situation recently where Joe Biden, if you notice, the rhetoric has gotten really thick in the Democratic Party in the way they've been talking about Trump supporters, or for the matter, the way they've been talking about Trump in general. The rhetoric has been rather insane. They've been dropping the Hitler line. And when I hear Hitler, I know those people are being shrill and something is going wrong. Well, what's going wrong is that they found themselves falling behind. And as Axios is reported a few days ago, they've started to point fingers on who they are going to blame in case it all falls apart, in case the jig is up and Kamala Harris loses. Now, to be fair to Harris, they've done Harris no favors. I mean, they basically gave her a truncated campaign. By the same token, Harris has done herself no favors. If you can't unmoor yourself from an unpopular president, then you're stuck with the defects of that same president. Is what it is. She had the opportunity to try to say she was going to be something different. After all, if you're telling me your new way forward, what is that new way? And if you can't articulate that new way, then it's the same old, which is not necessarily something that people wanted. Nevertheless, Joe Biden, of course, goes out, calls 100 million Americans trash, garbage, to be specific. And just so you don't think I'm lying to you, there we are.
They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of things is unconscionable, and it's un-American.
You did hear that right. The only trash out there are his supporters are garbage. Let's play it again. Just nail it down. I don't want you to think I'm hiding the ball or anything.
Or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
The only garbage I see floating out there are his supporters. Basically, Trump supporters are trash. Trump supporters are trash. 1/3 of the American population. Now, it's one thing to go after the candidate themselves. Fair enough. Even if the candidate did say something like that, which Trump didn't say, it was a comedian that they had on stage who was making a joke, and that particular comedian makes those type of he's equal opportunity in the way that he talks about that stuff. So, there's that. But let's say for the moment that the candidate himself said that. Is it still right to tell or go after his supporters, calling them trash? And if you indeed want, on some level, people to vote for you, you may have some people that might be on the fence one way or the other, but they may feel some kind of way about you calling them trash. Now, I would argue that is the way that liberals think. They may not say it. Joe Biden has just gotten too old to be able to keep the quiet stuff quiet, but that is the way liberals think. I keep telling you, when Donald Trump got shot, I would imagine 3 a.m. between many of them and their God, their only thought was, damn it, they missed. And so when Joe Biden is saying that, it's coming out of a context. Joe Biden was like, we need to lock Donald Trump up. Hillary Clinton was calling his supporters Nazis. You've had people calling him Hitler, calling him a fascist. And if indeed he's Hitler or fascist, which is ghastly. I mean, Hitler killed, 50 million people, and they're trying to compare that to Trump. But fair enough. If you're going to say that, then what are his supporters by definition? What are his supporters by definition? So, of course, Kamala Harris, by definition, is going to be asked for obvious reasons. Harris, what do you have to say about it? We need you to, distance yourself, finally, from your boss. Basically, I represent everybody. I strongly disagree with Joe Biden calling 100 million Americans trash. Now, it's weird to me that you would even have to say that, but fair enough. This fits within the context of the deplorables thing that Hillary Clinton said, right? It is the same energy. It's that same spirit. Okay, fair enough. Now, before liberals say, well, that's not really what we believe at all. That's not what we believe at all. Okay, fair enough. Well, let's go to fan favorite Whoopi Goldberg. And let's hear what Whoopi has to say.
I'm saying there's an unfair standard where his supporters have just decided it's baked in when he insults people, but they do take offense. Deplorables did matter. That comment from Hillary Clinton did matter. But I would say that Joe Biden is still the president. I'd like him to be.
Did you hear Whoopi? Whoopi Goldberg said she was right. Effectively, they are deplorable. And I would imagine Whoopi Goldberg probably doesn't disagree with what Joe Biden said there, calling them garbage or trash. Meaning, Whoopi Goldberg is not some kind of anomaly in regards to the way liberals think. That is the way they think. I used to be a Democrat. And as an African American, oftentimes you get confused with being a Democrat. Meaning, somebody will talk to you as if they're talking to another liberal, and then they're, made aware, oh, I've said too much because we're not on the same wavelength. I'm saying that what Whoopi Goldberg said, what Hillary Clinton said, what Joe Biden said, what this kind of Nazi rhetoric and everything else that they're spewing, that is not coming out of nowhere. That is within a context in the way that they think. Now, Trump has started to play on this immediately, and he rolls up in his own garbage truck. He rolls up in his own garbage truck. Let's hear Trump.
All right, guys. I think the
Democrats have done a very poor job. We're leading in every state. We're leading big, and I think that the comment made by really both of them, because there are really two of them, about being garbage, maybe 250 million people, they shouldn't be talking. That's like deplorable for Hillary. This is the deplorable for Hillary, and I think this is worse actually. For Joe Biden to make that statement, it's really a disgrace.
He said that the military would be used, that the military or the National Guard could be used on election day if necessary. Can you explain what?
I agree with him. It is a disgrace for Joe Biden to make that comment. I absolutely agree with him. And he says, I bought this truck for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Effectively, he is in a garbage truck that he purchased, and he's wearing the garbage uniform and everything else. Frank Luntz, famous pollster, had a conversation after about this. And when asked about this, Frank Luntz made the point of saying the deplorables comment did hurt Hillary Clinton. And the fact that Joe Biden is going to say garbage is even worse. That's going to affect a few percentage points that Harris may actually need in order to win the race, considering she's losing, or at the very least, there's a momentum going towards Trump in the battleground states. Right here. And
There is a completely unfair standard with
these polls that we're looking at here and we're talking about, Frank, notably, they were done before President Biden made his comments seemingly describing Trump supporters as, quote, garbage. The Harris campaign is trying to downplay the effect of those comments. Of course they are, but I wonder if you think that those comments are going to move voters.
It's going to be huge, because this is not some comedian saying something stupid and offensive at a rally where he should have been basically disinvited. This is the President of the United States endorsing his Vice President, saying something, and I know that there's different interpretations about what he said. It's still inappropriate. You still should be doing it. And I've watched Trump already seize this. The basket of deplorables was significant, was meaningful in 2016. In 2024, I can promise you that this is going to drive Trump turnout. He's doing it already. I can see, I'm sure there's going to be ads on as soon as tonight about this. This may be a turning point for those final 3%, and that's all it is, who still need to be persuaded. Now, I'll offer you guys something. We're going to be talking to them over the next couple days. If you want to do something on Monday, the day before, focusing on these last persuadables, I will tell you that Trump offends them, and they don't like him as a person. But Harris scares them because they don't know where she stands, and they feel that she hasn't been clear on some of the key issues, most notably immigration. Trump's got his weaknesses, Harris has her weaknesses, and they seem to be canceling each other out, which is why Harry's correct.
Yeah, he's right. I mean, imagine for the moment that you're on the fence. Imagine for the moment maybe you have family members that are in a particular political persuasion or particular, maybe they're Trumpers. Maybe they believe in certain things that you don't necessarily believe in. You can imagine, you can imagine that you may feel some kind of way about this idea that the president or that liberals in general think of you as garbage or fascists or Nazis or trash. Think of the sentiment that we're communicating here. The point that Frank Luntz is making is the polling is so narrow that 2 or 3% can affect the outcome of the race. And considering that you've just come out and have trashed a large share of the public, think of Mitt Romney for the moment, where Mitt Romney came out and said 42% of the country are takers. How did that go down? Did that motivate people to get to the poll that might have stayed home? And if we're having an election where the objective is to get as many people as possible to the polling, and the side that can get the most people to the polling wins, does that motivate those people to get up, go to the polls, and vote Trump, some of which might have just stayed home? Currently, we're looking at this. Trump up 0.4. Yesterday it was 0.3, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. When we go to the battleground states, Pennsylvania, Trump +1, Pennsylvania, Trump +2, Pennsylvania, tie, Pennsylvania, tie, Wisconsin, Harris +1, Wisconsin, Harris +6, oh, good job, Harris, Minnesota, Harris +3, Michigan, tie, Michigan, tie, here's Michigan, that one is an outlier, 5, North Carolina, Trump 1, New Hampshire, and then you get to the other states. I care more about the battleground states. This is not the time to antagonize either your voting bloc or the other voting bloc, especially if the objective is to win. I'm going to say that that damaged Harris to some degree. I don't know what that degree is, but certainly you don't want Joe Biden going rogue and saying stuff like that, which is quite possibly why they didn't want him on the campaign trail in the first place. I'm going to take a quick break. You guys are listening to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Like it, share it, subscribe to it, get your notifications for it. Be back in a moment. We are back. My name is, whoa, there we are. We are back. My name is Jamal Thomas. Thank you for joining me. This is Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing great this morning. I'm waiting on my guest, Daniel Lazar. He's going to be on shortly. I just communicated with him, so he should be signing on soon. Look, if you guys are digging the content, give it a like, share it. Definitely subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification button. For whatever particular reason, people are telling me that they don't get the notifications. So definitely hit the notification bell. And just to give a prep on the guest, Daniel Lazar. Daniel Lazar is an independent journalist and author, best known as a critic of the U.S. Constitution, American politics, government, and social policy in general. He's written several books, including The Frozen Republic, The Velvet Coup, and America's Undeclared War. You can follow Daniel on X at DHLazar and find his column on weeklyworker.co.uk and many other outlets. And where is my guest? All right, so I will go into something else and give a prep on what is taking place. Over the last few days in Georgia, there was a contentious election. Several things have been taking place in Georgia at the time. It is somewhat of a weird situation. But basically, to boil it down, if you remember, there was a FARA law that was on the books, or that was contested. Now, Georgia wanted to pass a FARA law. Basically, we want to know who's putting money into our government. We have a similar law. Russia has a similar law. And the logic of the law makes all the sense in the world. We do not want foreign sources dumping a bunch of money into our races without us knowing where it is coming from. You can adversely affect our politics, disrupt our politics, and you can do so from the shadows. That is a no-no. And because that's a no-no, we are going to pass a law. And that law is going to say you need to declare yourself a foreign agent if you're going to do that. All right. Now, again, we have the same thing in the United States. Russia has the same thing in Russia. When Georgia went to put one on the books, the U.S. flipped out, Europe flipped out, and they lost their minds. And the U.S. started to threaten Georgia about passing the law, claiming that you are moving in the wrong direction, you're supposed to be moving towards Europe, and we don't like the fact that you're trying to pass this kind of FARA law. Now that's weird. That's peculiar. And I remember when we were covering this at work, the first time I saw this, I was like, well, that's strange. Why would they take issue with Georgia passing a similar law that we ourselves have? I mean, after all, we've put people in prison for taking money and not declaring themselves a foreign agent. So why would they take issue with it in Georgia? Well, think about it for a bit. If you wanted to interrupt, affect, somehow manipulate the politics in Georgia, would having a FARA law help you or hurt you? And if you are either Europe or the United States, and you have an interest in influencing the politics in Georgia, would a FARA law on the books help you or hurt you? Meaning, obviously, they wanted the capability to influence the politics of Georgia. I mean, part of the reason that they were passing the law in the first place was because they were trying to defend what they considered to be the sovereignty. If and when my guest comes on, he's going to go further into this, but I'm just giving a primer for it. All right. They had an election recently. Georgia and the Dream Party, the Georgian Dream Party, wins. The president, Zarpashvili, I believe the name is pronounced, decides, I'm not going to accept the results. And not just not accept the results, give the speech where she's like, you're trying to steal our European future. And decides to not certify the results. Basically, it's trying to pull a Trump. All right. On top of not certifying the results, she stands with the opposition parties, and they come out and call for massive protests. We want a ton of people to come out and freak out and lose their minds about this election that we lost. Now, they were saying there were plenty of anomalies and everything else. Who knows? I don't live there. I'm pointing out they lost the race. at the very least from the outside of polls, or the way the polls were looking and the way the outcome of the result. They did not want to validate the results of the election. She comes out and says, well, we believe there's Russian interference in our elections. They ask her, do you have any evidence of Russian interference? She says, no. She says, but you can't expect me to have evidence of Russian interference because the United States didn't have evidence of Russian interference. And look how powerful and big the United States is. And if they can find evidence of Russian interference, then how do you expect me to find it? We don't know it, but we can feel it. And the fact that we can feel it is enough. You think I'm joking? That I'm paraphrasing, but that effectively was the argument that she was making. The feeling of Russian interference is enough to act as if it is true in fact. Very similar to what they did here, by the way. All right. Fast forward to Count Smirkula, Matthew Miller, threatening Georgia from the dispatch box of the State Department press room, effectively saying there will be consequences for moving closer to Russia. Just astonishing stuff. What do we have to do with them? What do we have to do with them? Like, it's bizarre in the way that they talk about this stuff, and the way that the U.S. will stand there and shake their fists at these other countries. Nevertheless, it's what happened. So I don't know if they have pushed her to certify the results of the election or not, but it was looking like a color revolution. Meaning, if you go back to Ukraine in 2014 and you get the democratically elected president, Yanukovych. Yeah, Yanukovych. And all of these people come out to protest. You have U.S. Congress members. You have Victoria Nuland handing out cookies. And this was when Victoria Nuland was talking about basically, let's midwife this thing, F the EU, choosing the people who are going to be in the Ukrainian government after the overthrow. It was that. And so when you saw the U.S. and Europe heavily involved, you saw all of these people calling for protests, calling for them to come out to the square and everything else, just like they did in Ukraine. There were reports of snipers being on the ground, just like in Ukraine. Then there was a sense, oh my God, something's about to go down. Eventually, all of those crisis actors that were out there, and I'm saying it flippantly, they eventually went home. And so it ended up not necessarily precipitating in the way that people thought it was going to precipitate. That is a good thing. The last thing we need is more chaos. What the belief goes that ultimately the reason that the U.S. and Europe wanted to be able to influence the politics of Georgia is because they accept and full well understand that Ukraine is fundamentally a loss. And because it's fundamentally a loss, they wanted to alleviate some of the pressure on Ukraine by opening a second front in Georgia. That was the thought. That, hey, maybe we can convince Georgians to go out there and die for us, just like we did the Ukrainians. Okay, good luck with that. Maybe we can give Russians something else to think about. If we can, win the election and get them to be hostile towards the Russian government. And it's not that they love the Russian government, they're just not as belligerent towards it. There he is. There he is. Let's see. Let's bring you in. Daniel.
How's it going?
Wait a minute. There we are. How you doing? Can you hear me okay?
I hear you fine.
Excellent. All right. So let me get this straight. Let me set this up. This, and this. All right. So I've already given you an introduction, so people know who you are. First, I'm going to say welcome to the show, man. How you doing today? You doing all right?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Not too bad, actually. Happy that you're with me. I was going over what was taking place. In Georgia and how mind-blowing the events were. It was legitimately looking like a color revolution was about to take place. And it had this Ukraine feel to it, where all of these people were on the stand. The president decides, Zorbasvili decides she doesn't want to accept the results of the election. You have Count Smirkula, Matthew Miller, shaking his fist at the State Department, threatening consequences because he believed Georgia was moving in a direction that the United States didn't want him to move. All of this stuff was taking place. Give us some context to why the U.S. is so invested in Georgia.
Well, first of all, the important thing to remember is these complaints have died down, complaints by the EU and the U.S., because the elections were pretty good.
Yeah.
There were some irregularities, some complaints, but the Georgia Green Party won pretty decisively. So, there's not much to argue with. And the U.S.
Wait.
Yeah, and the U.S. is on pretty shaky ground when it accuses others of
Wait,
stealing.
one second. They're saying there's an echo.
Here.
Wait, 1 second. They're saying they say there's an echo.
Oh, there's an echo.
Hold on. Let's see. 1 second. Let's see if I can fix it.
There's a lot of
1 second. Okay, let's try that. All right. Okay. Try it one more time and they'll tell me if it's back.
Okay, fine. So these complaints have died down. Complaints by the European Union and the United States and others, because it appears that the elections were pretty good. There were some irregularities, but the Georgia Dream Party won pretty decisively. And the U.S., is kind of reluctant to accuse other countries of stealing elections since it faces its own problems concerning phony allegations of stealing elections. So the charges have kind of died down. But what's going on here is that there's an international tug of war, which the U.S. is losing. For a number of reasons. I mean, first of all, Georgia does a lot of business with Russia. Russia accounts for about 11 or 13% of its foreign trade, and remittances come to around 10% of total Georgia GDP, total Georgian economy. And Georgia, by the way, is a small country. I think it's like 3.7 million people, with an economy of $31 billion, which, it's a lot of money to you and me, but as nations go, it's not that much.
Musk has more money than that. I mean, he's like what, $200 billion?
That's right. Elon Musk is richer than the entire nation of
Georgia.
So Georgia does a lot of business with Russia. It has long-standing cultural ties with Russia, going back centuries. There are religious ties as well. And also, the U.S. mainly wants to drag Georgia into its war in the Ukraine, against Russia in the Ukraine, and a war that the U.S. is now losing. So no one wants to jump on board a sinking ship. And Georgia doesn't want to either. Georgia doesn't want to risk its economic relations in order to join a war that the United States is losing, that the United States, first of all, provoked and is now losing. That makes no sense. So the Georgia Dream Party won pretty decisively. And something else got to keep in mind is that the West has poured tons and tons of money into Georgia via the NGO sector. NGO stands for non-governmental organizations.
Right.
The NGO sector is huge. All Georgia college students aspire for jobs with Western NGOs because they pay salaries that are many times what salaries are in the non-NGO sector.
Yeah.
So the NGO sector is huge. It's pumped up with Western money. The opposition press is pumped up with Western money. The opposition press pays its journalists far more than then pro-government journalists are paid. So the West has completely inflated this anti-government sector in order to essentially lure Georgia into its war in the Ukraine. As I said, a war it's losing. So Georgia just sees no reason to get on board this losing venture. So therefore, it said no, and I think it's really pretty remarkable. It shows which way the wind is blowing.
Now, this was the reason for the FARA law, correct? Correct me if I'm wrong, where there was this huge fight over trying to pass a FARA law. And as I was watching, this is what piqued my interest. I think it was when all of this first started, because I was like, well, we have a FARA law. Why are they complaining about the FARA law?
Yeah.
And then when you thought, and I was like, okay, well, the only reason they would really complain about that is if they actually wanted to put money into the country without having any kind of identification of who's putting money into the country, basically dark money to affect the politics of the country.
Yeah, exactly right. First of all, most countries have these laws.
Yeah.
Where if you are funded by a foreign government, you have to report that and register. And within the U.S. has these laws, and the U.S. goes bonkers, absolutely bonkers, when it comes to foreign meddling in American politics. Even though the actual instances have been very few and largely unproven. So Georgia passed a law requiring this hyperinflated NGO sector to register, to report its sources of finance, and the NGO sector embarked on a destabilization campaign in order to oppose this law. And it was backed by the EU, the US, etc. And it didn't work. So this is really important. So you talk about color revolution. Color revolutions are not working anymore because people are hip. They're aware of what they're about, and so they've stopped falling for this line, because color revolutions.
You know what's wild about it?
Yeah.
She said Russia was meddling in our election. And on top of saying Russian was meddling in our election, she went further and says something to the effect of, well, I don't know it. I don't have any evidence of it, but we just feel it. And then she goes further and says, well, America couldn't find evidence of it. And, as big and powerful as America is, and if they can't find evidence, why do you expect I to find evidence? I just feel it. Has she validated the results of the election yet? And if she hasn't, how can they compel her to do that?
Well, first of all, I believe her term is ending, so she's stepping down.
Okay.
This is Salome Zurabishvili.
Yeah, Basili. Yeah.
I'm sure I'm doing terrible violence to that, but her term is up, and she's stepping down. Now, this is completely crazy, and these accusations of foreign interference. Everybody interferes in everybody's elections.
Yeah.
Israel interferes in American elections. America interferes in Israeli elections. So what the hell is going on here? But just to get back to this question. So, essentially, the U.S. in pressuring Georgia to elect a pro-EU government, it's rather as if Russia was putting pressure on Canada to elect an anti-American government. Canada has like 3/4 of its foreign trade with Russia. And like it or not, Canada's got to be aware, of its relations with the U.S. at every turn. It may not be very fair, but that's a fact of life. And so Canada would not allow itself to be bullied by Russia into an anti-U.S. posture. So why should Georgia allow itself to be bullied by the U.S. into an anti-Russian posture? It's the same thing. So these
do they realize that this behavior is effectively pushing countries closer to Russia? Meaning they are taking this kind of, like, the idea for one, that the U.S. and Matt Miller is going to attack Georgia because they've put in a law or they've had an election, and then try to delegitimize the election by saying, well, there were irregularities and the Russians were working with them. They do realize that that stuff pushes people away. That doesn't necessarily bring you closer to Europe or want to make you get closer to Europe. Also, did they really believe that they were going to be able to create a second front in the Ukraine war?
Well, they were hoping to. I mean, after all, the U.S. certainly played a role in provoking a war between Georgia and Russia in 2008.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
Mikhail Saakashvili, the then president of Georgia, was on the phone several times a week with Saint John McCain, the beloved from and a famous neocon hawk.
yeah.
So yeah, they're trying their best to provoke a confrontation, but also, by the way, there's another election going on you may have heard about, and that is the one next Tuesday in the U.S.
Yes.
And I'm not going to make a prediction, but people think there's a good chance that Donald Trump is going to win. So therefore, Georgia knows that there's a big change in the works in U.S.-Russian relations, and so Georgia therefore is aware that that there's no reason that this neoliberal model is crashing, and there's no reason to go along with it.
I think, frankly, Trump has a pretty good chance of winning this race. And the wild part about it is you can see the momentum of it seeming to shift in a particular direction, which is wild because it's not like anything has happened in the race per se. And I guess that's a divergent thought. That's that's. I want to go back to Europe for a moment. Moldova. Because Moldova is one of those countries that also gets added into it. And before we even get to Moldova, you mentioned that the U.S. was involved in pushing Georgia to get into the war the first time around. Refresh my memory. What was that war over the first time around? It was something about a particular territory or peacekeeping troops that were attacked, something like that, right?
That a province called South Ossetia.
That's it.
And
That's it.
Or South Ossetia. It's a non-Georgian speaking province. They actually speak a dialect of Persian. Traditionally, had close relations with Russia. There's actually a North Ossetia, which is part of the Russian Federation. And this area had seceded, broken away from Georgia in the early 90s, along with another border region called Abkhazia on the Caspian Sea.
Wow.
And Georgia wanted this province back and accused Russia of fomenting secession, and etc. And there's little doubt that Mikhail Saakashvili, after ample consultation with John McCain, initiated war, which went really, really badly for Georgia. And in fact, Russian troops came within, I think it was 14 miles of Tbilisi, the capital city, but they then halted and pulled back. Not because they couldn't have marched straight into Tbilisi, but because they saw there was no point to it. But the point is is that war was provoked by the U.S. It ended very badly for Georgia, and Georgia doesn't want another war. I mean, wars are no fun. Wars. Property is destroyed and people get killed, and you don't want to stumble into war unless you really have no choice. And so Georgia's been there and doesn't want to go there again. And
I gotta be honest, I don't know why any country would allow themselves to get pushed into a war. I mean, the Ukraine thing, all of these people getting killed for what? Like, it's one thing if there are enemies at your gates. Okay, fair enough, I get that. But the notion that you allow yourself to be a proxy for some other country and you're giving up your countrymen for the betterment of America or for the betterment of Europe just seems outlandish to me.
Well,
let's go to Moldova for a moment. Explain that one. Moldova is this is the breakaway region Transnistria, right? And I think I may be mispronouncing that, but correct me if I'm wrong. Dig into that one further. Give us a little bit of context because the
Well,
Moldova thing is very similar to this.
yeah, a lot of these countries are being torn. Are being torn between the U.S. And the EU on one hand, and Russia on the other hand. Moldova is a Romanian-speaking country. Romanian, by the way, is a Romance language. Listen to it, sounds remarkably like French spoken with a Slavic accent. But there's also a Russian-speaking portion in the area called Transnistria. These are pretty dense politics for in a far world, but they've been torn also, and the U.S. is putting heavy pressure on them to essentially ally themselves with the EU and with the war in the Ukraine, and that's splitting the population in two because for precisely the same reasons, because the war is being lost, and the U.S. and they see and the U.S. is facing regime change itself, and they see reason to jump on board a sinking ship. So the same pressures are at work there. They're at work in Slovakia, the eastern half of what used to be Czechoslovakia. There's very similar pressures, divisions underway. I mean, essentially, when you lose a war, that you're in big trouble, and Biden has lost a war. This is a war he started, he provoked, and now he's losing it. And when you lose a war, you got a big debt to pay.
Losing its consequences, to put it mildly. And I guess the question becomes, I really wish Trump would have leaned into this more, because J.D. Vance, RFK Jr., they have questionable issues with them that I don't particularly like. But on the issue of trying to explain how this started, the context for it, this notion that we don't necessarily need to be hostile with everybody around the world, or at the very least open to a deal, that I do like. And what's funny to me, Politico.eu had a story recently saying that they were concerned that Europe was going to go in a different direction. That Germany, for example, and the parties in Germany want to end the war. You have the leftist party in France, where Macron is not allowing to take the government. The leftist party wants to end the war, stop the hostilities. You get Robert Fico, who effectively thinks that the Ukrainians are trying to kill him, that they were behind the first attempt and that they might have been behind the second attempt. That basically Europe has gotten to the point where they are sick of the way that they are going, and they're realizing they're getting poorer at the behest of the United States. Can you explain that? I got to be honest, I never understood that. Like Europe, the willingness that they are willing to take pain for America, whether it's gutting the oil, where Germany is no longer a main, it's like they've gutted their own industries. Many of those industries have moved to the United States. Europe has impoverished itself on behalf of America for this regime change project in Ukraine. It's bizarre.
Well, especially Nord Stream.
That's
bizarre of all. This is a multi-billion-dollar energy project, which it's Russian, European owned, but I think Germany invested. I think has the biggest share in it, and the U.S. blew it up in September 2022, and there's been a giant cover-up since, and the cover-up, includes Germany. I mean, imagine if I go into.
Wait, do you think Schultz on it? Do you think Schultz knew? And the reason why I asked that, Joe Biden, if you remember, they were on the stage. Joe Biden said, if they go in, we'll stop it. And they said, how would you do that? He said, we'll do it. Then the pipeline blows up. And people were like, maybe Russia blew up their own pipeline. But the wild part about it is Schultz was standing right there when it happened. I guess my thing was always, did Schultz know? Was he in on it?
Did he know ahead of time? I have no idea. I would kind of guess not, but I have. But this is, everyone knows it. That's the thing. You know it. I know it. Schultz knows it. Joe Biden certainly knows it. Kamala Harris knows it. I mean, this is the giant joke. They try to pin it on 6 Ukrainians and a rented 50-foot sailboat. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a complete joke. Obviously, the U.S. did it. I mean, this is one of those cases where the U.S. should be assumed guilty until proven innocent, because the evidence is so strong. But this is the greatest cover up. You know, the only thing what this cover up reminds me of, and there's a similar parallel, is that the immense cover up of Saudi Arabia's role in 9/11. And I
Yes.
am not a 9/11
Yes.
truther. I think that one has got to be very careful in assessing the evidence of who was responsible, but there is ample evidence of high level Saudi involvement in that operation. And the FBI worked to cover it up. So the same token, there's even stronger evidence of the U.S. role in Nord Stream, which Germany, for strategic reasons, has helped cover up. So the question is, why would they do that? And the answer is that the role of U.S. imperialism is such that they really have no choice.
Think of how weird the position that Germany is in. Nord Stream blows up, which damages their own economic future. So they have to buy oil or energy for 5 times more than they were getting at first. They blame it on the Ukrainians, a country that they are giving money, weapons, tanks, and everything else to. So not only is it blown up and blamed on the Ukrainians, they have to continue to give them weapons and money on top of the damage that they've accepted for Nord Stream. And they have to blame it on the Ukrainians because, as you said, they can't say the thing that everybody knows, that nobody says, that the U.S. blew up their pipeline because the U.S. hated that pipeline for like a decade or more.
Yeah, I mean, Ted Cruz, senator.
Yeah.
You know, I personally believe that he was someone's going to find that he was one of the frogmen who has helped set the explosives. But it's completely outrageous, and that's but the German government is doing badly as well.
Yeah.
And they're faltering in the polls because everybody knows what the truth is, and everybody knows that the Schultz Baerbock government is covering it up, and this is outrageous.
She is a beautiful woman, but Lord, she's a lunatic. She is nuts. One last thing before I let you go. How do you think that war is going to end up? I mean, obviously Russia is winning. Obviously, Ukraine has not been able to set up a defensive line. There's an article that I have from one of the Ukrainian generals who basically said the front has collapsed. We are getting crushed. And the conditions on the ground, the number of people that are getting killed. In the old days, like a year ago, I said the old days, but like a year ago, it might have been months before Russia could take a village or something like that. These days, it is like 2 over a weekend. Like it is picking up pace where the Ukrainians are dying faster, where it seems like Russians are dying less. Not to mention, they're dragging people in these videos. These videos are ghastly, where they're dragging people and throwing them in vans. How do you think this ends up? Do you think this ends up with a partition, or do you think the U.S. basically forces Ukraine to fight all the way through, even to the point where Russia takes it all and then having to fight a guerrilla war? Like, how far do you think Western forces are going to go with this?
First of all, it depends what happens next week.
Yeah.
If Trump is elected, he's made it pretty clear his top priority will be settling that war, and any settlement, I believe, will involve the relinquishment of the Donbass, the Crimea, perhaps other territory as well as a program of denazification and demilitarization. Finlandization is called. After the war, Finland had fought on the German side.
Right.
So after World War II, Finland was forced essentially to adopt kind of a policy of neutrality, demilitarization, etc. Now, it was a golden age for Finland, a backward, poor country suddenly blossomed into one of the wealthiest, most secure countries on earth. So I don't know what people are complaining about, but some kind of Finlandization is in store for the Ukraine. Um, uh, there was footage, a soldier, a Ukrainian soldier who took part in the Kursk offensive,
Right.
he was seen wearing a World War II waft
Yes.
S
Yeah. Yeah.
and shouting, "Schnapp's good, Schnapp's good." I mean, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
This is absolutely unbelievable. The regime that they are backing in Kiev, and and Russia is not going to put up with this, and I
No.
don't blame. I'm not going to put up with it. I don't blame it.
No.
I mean, to reenact the German invasion of Russia in 1941. Are these people mad?
Well, they keep, I mean, and our tax dollars are going for that nonsense. And then they would say, well, there are no Nazis in Ukraine. It's like, well, how the hell do you explain that? Well, Zelensky is half Jewish, so obviously there are no Nazis in Ukraine. Like, they would say this stuff, like, with a straight face. I wrote this article for Black Agenda Report, and I'll let you go after this. And I named it The Life and Times of a Russian Propagandist. And I was pointing out how saying something true gets you labeled as a propagandist. So if you say, well, Joe Biden said he was going to blow up the pipeline, he blew it up, and you show the video of it, you become a propagandist. Or if you point out, they are Nazis in Ukraine, Democrats signed this massive letter talking about the Nazis that were in Ukraine, and all of a sudden it just goes away. And then you get the situation where we have the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we're willing to end the world because we are not going to have those missiles in Cuba. And then when the situation reverses, we are completely oblivious, and we have no idea why Russia is behaving in the way that they're behaving, and they're somehow unique. It's just astonishing. Last question. I think you've been alive a little bit longer than I have. I got to be honest, I have been shocked at the way we've behaved over the last several years, whether it's with the Ukraine thing, whether it's with the Israel thing, whether it's with the way the government has gotten to the point of any notion of diplomacy is off the table. So if Donald Trump goes to talk to Kim Jong-un, he's a bad guy for doing so. He's sitting and talking with dictators. Have you ever seen this fog of propaganda that has descended over the public? And then they try to use like social media to try to deal with the fact that they're not telling the truth. I've never seen anything like this. Am I missing something on this?
No, you're completely correct. I mean, there's a this is what unipolarity means. I mean, since 1991, the U.S. has run the world, and since 2001, or at various points, the late 1990s, the early aughts, the U.S. has been increasingly overextended.
Yeah.
More overextended it grows, the more it turns on the propaganda machinery to try to cover it. So and there's a vicious cycle. Greater and greater overextension leads to greater and greater propaganda. So so when you're doing bad in the ground, you pump the volume up in order to get people to somehow disregard that. And so now the volume is pumped up to the max, but no one's believing it. And among them, the U.S. electorate, apparently. So we'll know for sure next week, but that's the way it looks. So it's a losing strategy.
Daniel, before I let you go, I got to get a prediction from you for the presidential election. I can't let you go without getting one. If you had to put your money on it, what would you put your money?
Trump.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on this one. Daniel Lazar. Daniel Lazar is an independent journalist and author, best known as a critic of the U.S. Constitution, American politics, and social policy in general. He's written several books, including The Velvet Coup and America's Undeclared War. You can follow Daniel on X at DH Lazar, and you can find his column at weeklyworker.co.uk and many other outlets. Daniel, man, much appreciation to you. Thank you very much. You have a good one, man.
My pleasure.
All right, guys, I'm going to take a quick break. You guys are listening to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Back in a moment. Welcome back. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. We're at the top of the hour. If you guys dig what I'm putting down, whatever platform you're listening to this on, whether it's Rumble, whether it's YouTube, anywhere else you're listening to it, give it a like, share it, subscribe. That was the one that I was forgetting. Also, make sure you hit the notification bell. I am here from 7 to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. And honestly, at this point, I've been popping in at all hours of the day or night. I have an interview with Susan Pye this evening. She's going to have a conversation about the Virginia law, basically the people who weren't supposed to be voting, putting them off the rolls. Ideally, people who weren't supposed to be voting. Who knows who else is in that voter purge. But I don't think I have an issue with purging people who aren't supposed to be voting. I guess the question is always, who else is getting caught up in that mix? But either way, Susan Pye is straight down the middle. So she's going to give us an understanding of what that means, what the law is, and what the intention of it and the reality behind it. Also, Scotty Nell Hughes. She's going to be here at 8:15. That should be a really good conversation. I always enjoy talking to Scotty. And a little bit later, Esteban Cillo is going to be here. And he is going to get into Lebanon, Iran, Middle East in general, have a really good conversation. Speaking of the Middle East, what time is it? Yeah, we have time. Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton. So over and over again, the Democratic Party has found itself in a bit of a quagmire. That quagmire is that they are supporting a genocide. It's just that. That is the quagmire. A political party is backing the wanton disregard for human life, starvation, systematic rape, imprisonment, theft of land, deprivation of resources, not allowing them to get supplies, blowing up hospitals, schools, setting tents on fire or dropping bombs on tents in the middle of the night. One depravity, one atrocity after the next. And 70% of that money and those atrocities are being paid by us. 70% is being paid by us. And to make this even worse, on top of the 70% being paid by us, our president, meaning none of this could take place without us backing it, without us paying for it. So Democrats have found themselves in a bit of a dilemma. That dilemma is, how do we get people who actually give a shit about the fact that they are killing people in mass and they're committing atrocities daily, swimming through rivers of blood? How do we convince those people who care to vote for us as we back this genocide? Over the past 4 days, Israel has killed 340 something people. One of those situations, they killed 100 at once. How do we convince people who care about life and limb to vote for us, considering we are fully funding and backing to the tune of 70% a genocidal regime that does not in any way care about life and limb and considers the local population to be animals? How do we do that? Kamala Harris has tried over and over again. She has failed miserably because what Kamala Harris has basically done is that people care about abortions. People care about other stuff. So, and then Obama came and also pointed out, why would you trust your vote to somebody who, and again, as I keep pointing out, it's not about trust. It's not about trust. Trump is a hypothetical. You are killing people now. If you are any police station in the United States, if you go into the police room and you say, I gave them money for the gun, I purchased the gun, I gave them the gun, I gave them the bullets, and I, knew that they were going to go and kill him, you will go to jail. You will be just as culpable as the person who pulled the trigger. It doesn't matter. They couldn't do it if you weren't giving them the means to do it. And to make this even worse, this is leading to a wider war. I mean, for God's sake, Israel is a nuclear power messing with Iran that can utterly wreck its face, in which case, who knows what Israel ends up doing when they realize, oh my God, we've gone too far. You would think that the president of the US would care about that and would be willing to, rein in its dog, but that's not what is taking place. They have gotten a blank check and they've used that blank check to kill as many people as possible to clear out the territory. Okay, fair enough. They want to create greater Israel. They need to get those people away, either extermination or expulsion. All right. So you need to make an argument to me as to why I should reward you for backing that. Obama has failed in his eloquence. Kamala has failed in her non-eloquence and awkwardness. So they bring out Bill Clinton to make another argument. Bill Clinton comes out and effectively tries to shuck and jive a genocide. You don't believe me? No, I'm being serious. few points. And apparently that speech gets even worse as he goes further into the speech. For one, Israel is an occupying power. Full stop. This is not rando sitting somewhere doing nothing. This is a country occupying another group of people because it is stealing their land and continue to expropriate their land. Something, by the way, that even the US government supposedly says it doesn't necessarily like all that much. So there's that. On top of that, meaning because we're pretending like all of this stuff started on October 7th. And I guess my point is it did not, nor am I going to accept the framing that it did. Israel is an occupying power. On top of that, Gaza is an open air ghetto. It's an open air prison for all intents and purposes. Hamas, at one point, was supported by the Israeli government. It was supported by the Israeli government because the idea is we can split the opposition. The Palestinian Liberation Organization keeps screaming about a state, and if we can bring in something in Gaza, and we can have the PLO in the West Bank, we can split the opposition. We can prevent a united front from pushing in one cylinder, in which case the Israeli government had no issue supporting Hamas, believing that they can basically control or on some level influence or manage the events. To make this even worse, where do you believe that inmates in a prison are supposed to fight? They're acting as if that this is some kind of open space. That's not the way this works. You've put people in a prison. They're fighting in the prison. Where do you expect them to go? And to be fair, every military that has massacred civilians has used the argument that, well, they were civilians, they were human shields. I hate to tell Bill Clinton this, but he does know that I believe it was the United Nations, comes out with a report talking about Israel systemic use of human shields. Does Bill Clinton know that? Bill Clinton doesn't really care about that because what Bill Clinton is trying to do is make an argument to justify the slaughter and murder of all of these people. That's what Bill Clinton is trying to do. And he's trying to do this on behalf of Kamala Harris. Because at the end of the day, they're stuck with a practical issue. How do you get people who give a shit to elect somebody who fundamentally is going to maintain this genocide and continue with the blank check? How do we do that? And so what Bill Clinton, Kamala Harris, and Barack Obama have to do is minimize it. I'll tell you this for context, and I'll take a break after this. While Bill Clinton, Kamala Harris, and while Bill Clinton, Kamala Harris, and Barack Obama are going around telling people that genocide is not that bad, and your relatives, your uncle, your mom, your cousin, your sister, your niece, all of them being slaughtered, butchered, burned alive, raped, sodomized, sexually abused, or other atrocities, that you shouldn't care about that as much. You should just vote Kamala Harris and reward the administration because the administration is doing all that they can do right now. Despite the fact that, again, 70% of the death, murder, killing that is being visited upon the Palestinians are coming from U.S. coffers. And it is Joe Biden who's at the helm and is allowing it all. While that happens, Donald Trump is going through Michigan telling Muslim and Arabs, I'm going to end the war. I'm going to end this. I'm going to end this. And a reporting came out, I believe it was yesterday, that Donald Trump apparently told Netanyahu, you need to end this before I get into office. Meaning before I'm elected, you need to finish this. Before I'm inaugurated, this needs to be done. Think of the contrast. The Democratic Party supporting, backing, and defending a genocide, either whether it's Smirkula Matthew Miller or whether it's the luminaries of the party. Whereas Trump, for as grotesque as he is effectively telling Muslims, even if he's lying about it, I'm going to end the war. You guys are listening to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I'll be back in a moment. Short break. There you are. How are you doing? Can you hear me okay? Oh, 1 second. Hold on. Let me bring you in. Let me bring you in. Come on. Welcome back to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Our guest is here. We are joined with the one and only Scotty Nell Hughes.
Happy Halloween to you and your Cash. You got to have a little fun. We're 5
Happy
days out of
Halloween
election
back
time.
at you.
You've got to have some fun.
Yeah, how you doing this morning?
Before an election.
You're looking good this morning, and you got your hat on and everything else, and I can see the decorations in the background.
Let me just say, it's not only about just being, this being an election year, but I'm dressed up as a Kamala Harris voter. Just kidding. I mean, the jokes just write themselves on Halloween this year, okay? I mean, there's nothing more nightmarish than in an election that we're living in this time. Our candidate's at the top, whichever side of the aisle you're in, you've got to sit here and you've got to have a little fun. Because if not, if you haven't recognized it, I think you've done it in the speech that I just heard, the monologue I just heard, the temperatures and the emotions are boiling so high on so many different issues. If you want to get offended, now's your time, because you can get offended by everything and anything. And it seems like everybody has, I don't want to say the thinnest skin, because some things do deserve to definitely be addressed. But you breathe today on either side of the aisle and people are already just angry at you. Well,
I would say that the trash comment by Joe Biden is pretty grotesque, any way you look at it. And I offended. No, I didn't get offended. I'm not a Trump supporter one way or the other. But from the standpoint of calling 100 million Americans trash, that is pretty extreme any way you look at it. In fact, I'm going to play the clip just for the audience to see it, just in case somebody is living under a rock and they have missed it. 1 second. I believe it's
these polls that we're looking at here, and we're talking about, Frank. Notably, they were done.
And this one.
From Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is just supporters. His demonization of seen as unconscionable.
The only garbage I see out there are his supporters. This puts me in the mind of the deplorables comment. I think the wild part about this is, and liberals may not want to admit this, but I strongly suspect that what Joe Biden did, he's too old and too, let's say, cognitively challenged to not say the quiet part out loud. That 20 years ago, he would have been able to finagle that even if he was thinking that, he wouldn't have necessarily said it. And I would wager to you that many liberals actually believe that, just because of the way they talk about Trump support. I mean, the Nazi stuff, calling Trump Hitler. I mean, Hitler killed 50 million people, and they're calling Trump Hitler. And if indeed you're calling him Hitler, what does it mean for the people who are voting for him? Like, the language has gotten, the rhetoric has gotten just outlandish.
Jamal, I 100% agree that behind the scenes, that's what most Kamala Harris, especially their strong progressive base, I don't say the word progressive, their strong base, absolutely believe that Trump supporters are garbage. And like you said, he just said it out loud. But let me just say this. One might wonder if this was done on purpose. And I've even seen liberals, I even saw Meghan McCain put this out publicly. Did he do this on purpose? You know, Jill Biden is not happy how this whole thing has gone down. We saw a few weeks ago at a funeral, Barack Obama whisper to Joe Biden, "You're right, she's not as strong as you." You know, a few months ago, and after the debate, you had George Clooney come out with this letter, and it basically unleashed this tide of people saying, yes, Joe Biden needs to resign. He doesn't need to be at the top of the ticket. I have to wonder if yesterday was the whistle to all of those liberals to say, you know what? You don't have to defend this woman or this ticket. You can start backing off, because we know that we're in so much trouble on Tuesday. We don't want to take you down as well. So feel free now to distance yourself. I'm going to give you that permission. You can distance yourself from the Kamala Harris campaign and go forward and not feel guilty about it, because it was so, if he is that in much cognitive decline,
Yeah.
he still has the red button. He still has the red phone.
Yeah.
He still has whatever red that triggers nuclear weapons in this world. He does not need to have access to even the kitchen silverware, much less nukes. If he is in that much cognitive decline, I'm sorry.
Look, I agree with you. I was saying the same thing. Like when he first stepped down, and I was like, why is he still there? Like if Robert Hur, Robert Hur, right, the one who wrote the Hur report, when he wrote that report and he pointed out well-meaning old man with a poor memory, and Democrats were flipping out. Oh my God, I can't believe he said that. I can't believe he said that. It's like, but that is literally what we see. And then all of this thing about, well, anytime you see Joe Biden look bad, it's a deep fake. I mean, the media was basically hiding that stuff. And then it gets to the point where they're like, all right, he can't run because he's not altogether there enough to run. And then my first thought was, well, if he's not there enough to run, why is he still in office? Why is he still the president? Why hasn't he stepped down? I agree with you 1,000%.
Because ultimately, and this is what I've said, I always thought, and I'll be the first to say I was wrong, is I didn't think Joe Biden was going to last a year when he was elected. I always thought that this was going to be a setup for them to take him out and put in the vice president. Then we realized Democrats didn't like Kamala Harris. 92% of her staff resigned in the first year. They realized that she was just as much of a mess as they thought she was going to be. So guess what? They went, yep, we'll stick with good old Joe.
Yeah.
But then you get to the debate where it's public. Like I said, if his cognitive decline is this bad, he should have been removed. But Democrats ultimately, I guess, don't want Kamala Harris. They could have had him resign back in July and said he's not of the right mental state. He's gone greatly down, but he didn't do that. So I have to wonder, and like I said, Jill Biden's the key to all of this. She has let it out a little bit. You don't see her on the campaign trail for Kamala Harris. She is mad. She is angry. She is one very angry white woman because they have not only taken out her husband, they took out her power. And I think that's, like I said, if you can't have it both ways, Dems. Is he in bad enough cognitive decline that he doesn't need to be running in the Oval Office right now, and they should have taken him out? They should have pulled what they wanted the cabinet to pull on Donald Trump, or was yesterday done on purpose, or was that comment about garbage done on purpose? Whatever it was, let me say this. It gave Donald Trump, just like McDonald's gave him a great setup, rolling into your campaign in a garbage truck. Normally would be completely an absolute disaster. The worst thing ever to put your name alongside a garbage truck. Usually that's what the opposition does. They put their enemy, they put their opposition's name on a garbage truck and roll that around town. Nope. Donald Trump slapped it on there and put a vest on and got in the driver's seat, actually the passenger seat, and rode in on it like a white horse. Who would have thought the Republican presidential candidate's white horse was a white garbage truck? And it works. What a relief it is. Put it back on my hat now. That right there is, who would have ever thought all of the, you can't make this drama up. And no wonder why. Yesterday, I talked to Saudi Arabia, I talked to Dubai, I talked to London, I talked to India. The whole world is watching and paying attention right now. Now, on some hands, I still say they're watching us like we watch the Kardashians. I mean, it's like the Real Housewives of the White House right now. But on the other hand, you can tell there's some real fear in their minds because whomever we elect will have an impact on every nation in this world, because it's going to show, like your monologue said, are we moving forward to a war that doesn't involve any of us?
I know.
And we're going to expect our allies to come to our side, or are we going to actually detract? I found it interesting. I think you'll find it interesting. I went on the largest English-speaking Arab network yesterday.
Yeah.
Wonderful people. All had great British accents. It was beautiful. Donald Trump did an interview with them last week, sit-down interview with them. And I'm like, what does that tell you where Donald Trump already is going? He is already knowing that he is going to have to go and start talking to these other countries, these other press in these other countries. Tell their people to put their people's minds at ease, to tell them, because he can't trust the Western media to present his positions directly. So he's going straight into these other foreign media outlets, which I think is amazing. and giving them the time of day, letting their host ask the questions, because I think Donald Trump realizes the rest of the world is sitting by holding their breath going, who are the West going to put into power? Because it affects everybody.
Curious, who do you, if you had to guess, I've shown these polls before to the audience, the Real Clear Politics polls. Let's see, this, and this. And showing the way it was working back in September, I think it was September 24th, Harris is up 2, at least on average. And then as you look, by the time you get to October 21st, it's a straight down. I mean, almost like a vertical line down. And you end up with Trump up 0.4. Now, that's not huge, but considering where they were in an election where they haven't been moving much, that is huge. And then when you look at the local, okay, well, Harris has to win Pennsylvania. Okay, well, Pennsylvania +1, Trump, Pennsylvania +2, Pennsylvania tie, Pennsylvania tie. And then you get to Wisconsin. Harris seems to be having a decent lead in Wisconsin. But when you get to Michigan, tie. This one is an outlier. North Carolina +1. Meaning, when you get to these battleground states, she is struggling in the battleground states. And I guess the question becomes, what happened? Like, it wasn't like they had a debate. It wasn't like, Kamala Harris fell off the stage or something like that. Why do you think there was such a precipitous drop in her campaign? Why do you think there was such a drop in her campaign? Why do you think it tilted? Because as I was telling the audience, there was a feeling about it. You could almost feel the fact that one was struggling with a certain amount of confidence. The other one seemed like they were struggling. And then Axios pointed out that they thought she was going to lose and that they were already pointing fingers at the reason as to why. Give me your thoughts as to why the decline.
Jamal, you know this. When you're drowning, as the Democrats were doing under Joe Biden those last few weeks while he was at the top of the ticket, when you're drowning, the best breath of fresh air is when you go up and you take a big gulp. I mean, that goes into your body. But guess what? If you can't swim, you're going to sink again. And that's exactly what this year's Democratic ticket has done. It's now back down below water and they're running out of oxygen. You can't hide, and I mean this in a light way, you can't hide the crazy. And her crazy has come out. I think they wish they would have not put her at the top of the ticket until like the end of September. So then it'd been less time for people to actually get to know her. But in a world that we live in today, where you have cameras everywhere, where you have pictures everywhere, where it's not just the mainstream media as much as they're trying to control the narrative. But when you're seeing different accents, depending on what audience she's in front of, people go, are you being authentic? When you're seeing the policies that she's coming out, she's so back and forth. Does she agree with Trump's immigration policies? Does she not? When you see people who have known her, whether they were in Congress with her, whether they were, served with her under vice president, when you see them starting to distance themselves from her because they know once that shininess, once that gulf, the gulp of air and the oxygen is gone, you go, oh my gosh, what the heck are we stuck with? I would much rather put Trump in office, let him deal with this mess. And it's going to be absolutely, by the way, Trump getting in office is not the end of the world. I mean, not going to save the world. We're in trouble on so many avenues. One man is not going to be able to do this miracle. He's not going to be able to snap his fingers and all of a sudden you can go buy a car again because you're not paying 14% interest, or get a house because you're not paying 20% interest. Nope. It's going to take a lot to get everything back and rebalance. I do feel like this is going to be a real hard adjustment for the U.S. And Democrats going, you know what? Let Trump take the fall for this and we can regroup and reapply again in 2028, because by then, if he doesn't fix it, we're going to be even downhill more than we are today. So I think
I will tell you, I am deeply concerned on so many levels. I mean, for example, with $35 trillion in debt, $35 trillion, $2 trillion under Biden as a deficit for this year alone, the amount of money that we owe and the amount we pay on the interest is about as much as we pay for defense. Nearly $800 billion or something to that effect. We are in 2 wars and we're funding both wars. And in the Israel conflict, we're paying 70% of all of their expenses. In Ukraine, we've paid $200, maybe $300 billion. I mean, that's probably a low ball in regards to the amount of money that we've been spending in both of those wars. Um, and either of those conflicts could go nuclear. Israel's a nuclear nation. China, Russia, Iran. Well, Iran's not nuclear, but they can get the bomb if they need to, especially if it's a situation where they believe they're being threatened. And the Russia thing, oh God, if they would have just agreed to fire weapons into Russia, they would have been at war with NATO immediately. None of that stuff comes up at all. It's like just out of eyeshot. It's very bizarre. And what they tend to use, instead of just kind of like dealing with reality, is they have this false reality that overlays all of this stuff in the way that it operates in order to, get from point A to point B for political expedience. And then they try to corral social media, complaining that social media is telling too much in that sense. No, I'm deeply concerned. I don't think either of these candidates is going to, let's say, change the context of the way things are going so far. But correct me if I'm wrong, if you disagree with me on this.
Well, let me say this. Let's just take one department, okay? RFK says that he wants to go to Health and Human Services, make America healthy again.
Yeah.
You travel around the world. I've traveled. We can guarantee that the food that is provided in other countries
It's better.
are 100 times more healthy,
Better.
and it doesn't have the preservatives and all the chemicals that we here in the U.S. have been allowed to put in our foods that we digest every day.
Agreed.
The pushback on RFK, even from Republicans, for him to go in and reform something like the health of America, to say, I want to take out these impurities. I want to go after the Monsantos. I want to go after, oh my goodness, that alone is enough to make these corporate gods be set on fire and fight him every step of the way. And you're already starting to see it. I saw yesterday in an interview that someone with this transition team said, like hell will RFK be put in charge of HHS. I don't care what Donald Trump said. They're already these. So it's not even going to be the Democrats meltdown. It's going to be the Republicans that are going, our little fiefdoms that we've created with our bank accounts is about to be destroyed, because you have RFK who does not care. As much as I would like to see him probably be in charge of the CIA or the FBI, but him being part of Health and Human Services, if he can cleanse our food system, agriculture, all of that, I am 100% before it. I think that would be incredible. They're not going to let him do it, and they're going to fight him every step of the way. But that's just Health and Human Services. And then we're going to get into education. Then we're going to get into the drugs, and we're going to get into the drug costs. Like, these fiefdoms are shaking right now, because they are thinking they can control these individuals. Social media, you mentioned it. Elon Musk, perfect example. He's out there fighting for freedom of speech, like what you're seeing on X right now. And all of a sudden, here's what I love about it. You have Jeff Bezos with the Washington Post saying, nope, not going to get involved in this one. I'm backing off. He sees the writing on the wall. I do believe that at the core of Jeff Bezos, I know people are going to hate me for this, I actually think he's a good person, because he raised himself up from the bootstraps. I think from his, from coming out from his garage, I think if he can go back to little Bezos and remember what little boy Bezos's ethics and principles were before he had his multi-billion-dollar yacht, I think ultimately we could actually have a potential to work with it. I think there's something there. I don't know if we need to have like the 3 goes to Bezos Pass visit him on Christmas Eve or whatever. But I don't think he's a bad person. I mean, look, I think the moment that you get a ton of cash, that it affects you in a certain way. It's like, look, Bezos, Musk, all of these guys want to maximize their cash. I mean, maximize their profit. Yeah. And so they build these companies in order to get as rich as possible. And they, take certain actions. I think Bezos' argument, and let me actually, do you believe his argument? His thing was, look, faith in media has declined to such a degree. And part of the reason that faith in media has declined is because they believe that people have, let's say, ideological points of view, as opposed to just actually reporting the news. And so, no, we don't necessarily want to give this idea of an endorsement, because we need to stop that process. We need to gain or regain credibility back. Do you trust that? Or do you believe that? Or do you think it was more like, I think Trump is going to win and I don't want to piss him off, so I'm not going to allow my paper to give an endorsement? I have hope. The fact that he even publicly said that means that at least he's listening to people, Elon Musk. You looked at Facebook this time around. You've not had near what we dealt with in 2020 under the COVID regulations and all of it. Yeah. I think these guys, as much as they like to say that they're independent and they've got their own bullocks and they're bullish themselves, I think they're like everybody else. If they look to the left and they look to the right and these guys are saying it, then I can finally say what I've always wanted to say.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and we saw it, I always use the great Chick-fil-A from 15 years ago. Conservatives, once that momentum started, by golly, we're going to just, fight for Chick-fil-A because, and their anti-gay stance, and we're going to get behind it. And you had this huge revolution that basically built Chick-fil-A. Same thing happens on the other side as well. I think they don't want to stand on their own. They've seen that it didn't kill Elon Musk's company. In fact, Elon's actually grown what they all want, in power, in stature, besides just being a car guy. Now he's actually making a difference. So I think that's kind of what you're seeing. And I think for so long, so many on the left said the only way you're going to get away with this is if you go along with our narrative. And so finally, these rebellions from it. I mean, Elon Musk, first of all, here's yesterday I heard Sean Hannity saying, I'm actually considering getting a Tesla. It's actually a really good car. I'm going,
wow.
You remember that was Alexandria Cortez? That's the kind of car she drove around and was made fun of forever on it. But now, because Elon Musk has turned conservative or more libertarian, Sean Hannity's endorsing a Tesla, an electric car.
I got to be honest. Things have gotten very bizarre. I call myself a lefty, and from my point of view, the left was anti-war, free speech. The Noam Chomsky's of the world. Free speech is for the speech that you don't particularly like. Otherwise, what's the point in having a speech rule if everybody agrees, right? The entire premise of the law is people are going to say things that you don't particularly like. People are going to say things that sometimes might be necessary against a government that may be somewhat tyrannical, and there need to be protections for those people. And then you hear Tim Walz, who comes out and says something like, they have to do something about the First Amendment. You get John Kerry saying the First Amendment is a problem. You get Hillary Clinton saying they need to lock people up. You get Kamala Harris saying they need to go after Twitter. These people have lost their minds. And it's almost like they want to control the narrative to such a degree. And whereas they had mainstream media and everything else, and now you have social media where people can have points of view that bug and annoy the hell out of them. And so their thought is, we need to somehow corral social media. So we need to do something about TikTok. We need to do something about X. We need to put pressure on Facebook, or put pressure on Twitter, or put pressure on YouTube in order to get rid of voices that we don't particularly like. That stuff is terrifying. That is not the way the left behaved. And so now you have the supposedly left-leaning party that is pro-war, that is backing Ukraine to the hilt, that is antagonistic to China and Taiwan, that is attacking Trump for making a deal or making peace with North Korea. This is supposed to be the left, who are against free speech, who are pro-censorship. I don't know what happened to the left. I honest to God don't.
Well, it's funny you brought up TikTok. I think this is amazing because most people don't recognize. Remember about probably a year ago, 2 years ago, there was this huge movement to get rid of TikTok. And there's still some bill was signed. There's still it's still out there. You don't hear about it anymore, but there was even the states were banning it on their local. The federal government wouldn't let it be on government phones. TikTok. They were horrible. And I kept going, give it a minute. The CEOs of TikTok are realize what's happening or how to handle this. And they did. And guess what they did? They ended up and they started paying. They hired an American lobby firm who's going in now, and they're paying all of these campaigns, both at the state and the national level. And all of a sudden, TikTok has just dissolved. And so they're not against it, and give it a year, keep that money flowing. And you're going to hear now they're going to be endorsing TikTok again, like they did during COVID. Just follow the money. And I don't know if TikTok has changed and taken off. I don't know what kind of, if they're being manipulated, controlled as we've seen past social media platforms yet. But at least they figured out, put the money in the politicians' pockets and they'll shut their mouth. And that's what that was. Because it was coming a lot from Facebook. It was coming a lot of the time from Jack Dorsey when he owned Twitter. They were the ones that said, because all of their money had been gone, revenue had gone to TikTok. Well, guess what? Now that revenue is back in the politicians' pockets. Zip. All of a sudden, TikTok, we're seeing, pretty soon, I think we're going to see, we've seen Kamala Harris doing a dance on TikTok. So guess we're going to use TikTok again.
Well, that was the funny part. They were attacking TikTok while simultaneously advertising on TikTok. That was the weirdest thing in the world. Scotty, I want to go to this thread. And the reason why I thought of you, and I wanted somebody who was either at RT or Sputnik, because I wrote an article. I don't know. You may not know this, on Black Agenda Report. And Margaret Kimberly asked me if I wanted to write one. I said, sure. And the article is named Life and Times of a Russian Propagandist. And I point out how over and over again, when something would come up, the thing that used to annoy the hell out of me working on the show was I would get something right and get no credit for it. Mm-hmm. Like, meaning it's like I would be clear-eyed in my assessment of something that for months in advance and get it right. But because you work on Sputnik or RT, you don't get credit for it. It's almost like you're in your own little sandbox of the world, despite the fact that you're seeing the world far more clearly than what mainstream media is putting out. So, New York Times comes out with an article, and this is Glenn Greenwald points this out, and they're identifying, quote, stream of conspiracy theories on Truth Social. And I'm gonna give you some of these. The U.S. has a deep state, a permanent secret DC power faction. That's supposed to be a conspiracy theory. Kamala Harris and the media hid Joe Biden's failing health. That's supposed to be a conspiracy theory. The U.S. blew up Nord Stream 2. Now, this one is just that has a special place in my heart. So, just so people can see what I'm pointing out. Nord Stream 2 has a special place in my heart because I was at the company when this happened. I know you were working there too, or working at RT. And all hell broke loose. And I remember when it first blew up, they said, well, obviously, Russia blew up the pipeline. And I'm like, you guys can't be that stupid to come up and say some nonsense like that Russia blew up its own pipeline. And yet, that's what they did. They said Russia blew up its own pipeline. To make this even worse, you had the clip of Joe Biden standing right there with Schultz, if Russia goes in, I will stop the pipeline, or the pipeline would stop. And they said, sir, how would you do that? He said, we'll do it. And they looked at Schultz, and Schultz had nothing to say about the fact that the president has just threatened a German and Russian pipeline. And the idea, they're acting as if the clip of Joe Biden saying that just vanished. Like, this stuff is not conspiracy theories. This stuff is, they did hide Joe Biden's failing health. They literally hid his failing health. U.S. did blow up the pipeline. It wasn't a bunch of Ukrainians in a dinghy that just so happened to go out in the USS Minnow. Clearly, we did it. Soros uses his wealth to control Democrats. 95% of the races are won by the side with the most cash. Soros is a billionaire. He supports Democratic causes. Why on earth would that not influence Democrats? I think this is the problem with papers like the New York Times. This stuff is outlandish. And this is why it terrifies me when they're going after this notion of misinformation, because the New York Times would consider all of this to be misinformation. All of this is true. Give me your thoughts.
Oh, I'm sitting here. I'm just going, if you could only hear the conversations that happen so often, not only in my circles, but in my home, because I would start screaming at the television, because you're right. We report on all of those as well at the time. I would literally go, I literally talked about this 4 months ago. And I know you and I, perfect for me, one of the biggest perfect case in facts. And this is what we might disagree on how it was handled, but the coronavirus. Yeah. My first report on the coronavirus was January 7th. Going, guys, there's something going on. Look over in Asia. I did a special on January 18th. Saying we need to start putting some preparations here in the U.S. for our health. Did not understand there was no conspiracy theory. It's going, something is happening. The hospitals are filling up. We had reports coming in. Nothing. Guys, if this comes to America, it's going to shake our economy. It's going to shake our daily life. I'm watching. We did reports weekly, specials, everything, screaming about it. Finally, the United States started catching on at the end of February. Hey, people are getting sick, or the hospitals are filling up. I seriously I could not tell you how frustrating it was, because we were trying to we had people that had gone. I remember we had those, we had the disturbances going on in Hong Kong, the protests going on in Hong Kong.
That's right.
We had a whole crew over there, and Sarah came back, and our sickness went through our whole staff. And we're not talking just kind sickness. I mean, it was really bad. I really feel like we had a taste of it back in the fall. And I mean, it went through people that even were on Sputnik, from Rachel to Steve, Chris Dawkins, and it went through my family. So whatever bug we had, and nobody here, all of us went to the doctors, nobody knew what it was. We went through all the tests. Nobody could figure out what. So then you fast forward, the country starts realizing in March, hey, there's this thing called the coronavirus. It was frustrating as hell because I was going, if you would have listened to us back in January, we might have back then been able to put in some of the preparations that could have stopped us from having to shut down everything. Because if you paid attention to the international news networks, to us, but I cannot believe that the West didn't know about it. They didn't necessarily want to report on it yet. At that point, it was kind of still a conspiracy theory. Oh my gosh, that, that there's this, who would want to put in a global pandemic? And then where did it come from? That was my biggest frustration. Then you got the vaccinations and how quickly they ran that through. And at that point, Ben Swan was a colleague of mine doing reports on it. He was going, guys, something's not right about this vaccine. They're doing it too quick. They're not doing the proper studies on it. And then when they went through and said that you can sue the pharmaceutical companies, we were one of the first people to break that story. Zero attention. I mean, can you believe that the White House, that nobody would cover 3 pharmaceutical companies being given a complete clean slate that they could do whatever they wanted to a pill or to a vaccine and never be held liable for it?
Well, from my understanding, that's just, look, I guess 2 points. I don't think there's anything wrong with the vaccine, frankly. If there is 100, and I don't think you and I are going to agree on this one. If you have so many people that are dying at once, and you have this kind of medical emergency, it's not shocking that the government takes this kind of muscular action. I mean, Donald Trump himself was the one that was pushing for the vaccine. What is it, warp speed or something to that effect, in order to try to get a vaccine for the product. If I'm not mistaken, this is something that RFK talks about, how vaccines are exempt from some level of, like you can't sue a vaccination company because vaccines are apparently inherently, what is it? They're inherent good or something to that effect. Correct me if I'm wrong, though.
No,
RFK makes this argument, and when he's talking about drug companies and the way that they were able to get over in the production of vaccines without having to deal with any kind of liability associated with those same vaccines.
The difference is when you were not being fully transparent about what the results of your initial testing of those vaccines were.
That is true. That's
where our reporting was coming in, going, they were saying,
Agreed.
oh, it's 100%. There's no side effects. We're not seeing anything, or, of the 50 people, everybody
Agreed.
was cured of it. That's where
Yes.
I was upset. Because I think if you had been more accurate in your reporting, the people would have said, okay, well, maybe we give it just to the elderly. Maybe we put it just in the nursing homes. Those are the most vulnerable for it. I think we could have handled that. And I'll be the first to say, and I've gone on record for it, Donald Trump lost in 2020 because of how he handled the COVID virus. 100%
Agreed.
why
Agreed.
it was. He lost it. People were disappointed in the fact that he fell to this panic that you don't want to see out of your commander-in-chief in a time like this. But back to that passage. So to your point, I have often, let's even talk about when Ukraine invaded Russia. That was, I said Ukraine invaded Russia. When Ukraine took the territories, nobody had been reporting on what the truth of what was going on in the Donbass region and what was happening to the people who lived there. The Russian sympathizers, nobody was talking about the election that happened in 2017 that put Zelensky in 2018 that put Zelensky in power. No one covered that. But then all of a sudden, you get into 2021 and everybody's a Russian-Ukrainian expert. And I don't know what I'm talking about, even though I've been covering it for 4 years, of the atrocities that had been happening in the Donbass region to the Russian sympathizers, to the overwhelming mass crowds there, and the horrible things that have been happening. But I'm the one, I'm the Russian propagandist. I'm like, I was talking about this before there was a war there. And it was a coordinated effort to make sure that I was the one that looked like, or you, or anybody that was actually telling the truth of the region and why Russia felt like they needed to intervene at that time. Why this was happening. It was always this Russian invasion. I'm like, no, it's actually a defense of the people in the region who have been time and time terrorized. I mean, you look at you can't look at what's going on in Palestine right now, what's happened to the Palestinian people by Israel, and then go, oh, but nothing was happening in the Donbass region. Those people, those don't count. The Russians were in that region. The truth of that whole war was never going to be allowed to be exposed here in the West because it would not justify the amount of money that we've put into it and will continue to put into it. So I agree with you 100%. Even this is what I love about it. pretty known, well talk show host. Not going to tell you what his name is, but he's there in Washington, D.C. Sent me a text the other day. I've not heard from him for a while. Sends me this text, and he says, "Admit it, girl." And it's the Washington Times story. Whistleblower James Comey had FBI honeypot spies infiltrate Trump's 2016 campaign. And I replied back.
This is the Carter Page thing, right?
Yes.
Where they were spying on his campaign, and Carter Page was like a CIA asset or something like that.
Well,
and
they were saying there were honeypots.
Papadopoulos is.
Papadopoulos, there were honeypots that were purposely put
That's
in.
right. Yeah.
And I said, and he was serious. I said, "You need to admit it." He says, "This has you all over it. It makes perfect sense." And I came back and I said, "It's funny. I can't be an FBI agent and a Russian spy. Take your pick. Which one do you want me to be? Because you've demonized me for working for RT and being a Russian spy. But prior, just to that, I was a FBI agent." That's how ludicrous I think many in the mainstream want to make it, because they realize they were wrong for all these years, and so they're going to demonize the people that were right. And this is the fallout that we get.
But there's never accountability with it.
No.
Like there's never a come to Jesus moment about it. So you can kill all of these people in Iraq, and then after a while, Dick Cheney is trounced out as, well, he supports Kamala, so he's a statesman. He's a great guy. It's super weird. I mean, I remember when Keith Olbermann was losing his mind on TV, and he would do these monologues every night, attacking Bush, attacking Cheney, attacking the war machine. And then fast forward where Donald Trump gets in, and he sends out a tweet. Yeah, maybe I overdid it with Bush, considering Trump. And it's like, but Bush killed. He got like 1 million people killed. Trump has a lower body count than even Obama. Like, it's, why do you think their scale seems to be so off on this? Like they seem to, let me ask this in a different way. Do you think that liberals would have got more bang for the buck dealing with Trump in a different way?
Yes and no. I think if I was in the liberal media right now, I would be salivating in the next 4 years of covering him. I mean, it's going to be a hard job. It's going to be the easiest job. There is going to be material every single day. There's not going to be a boring news cycle. People are going to pay attention to your news just to see. I mean, like I said, he rode up in a garbage truck. You just, the absolutely unpredictable that he can become. That being said, yes, I think if they would not have demonized him so much, because he was their friends prior to this, he was one of them prior to this party. He was hosting the best parties they all wanted to be in. I think if they would go into it with more of an outlook of, I don't agree with you, I don't like you, but I'm at least going to cover it and let people make up their own mind. The problem with that is it's the money and the power. Because like I said, people getting in right now, even they're already going, oh gosh, Monsanto's going, good gracious, what are we going to do? General Electric, oh my goodness, what's going to happen when, he tries to bring oil back in? All of those things, it all comes back to who owns these media conglomerates and how much money are they going to lose underneath Trump? Because the one thing we have also seen underneath this administration is the ability to monopolize and to take out the enemies that they don't agree with through government rules and regulations. That's going to go away potentially if Trump sticks to his agenda. He faltered on it a little bit because of the people around him in 2016. I'm hoping in 2020 he's pissed off enough that he's just going to go straight bullish and knock all of this bureaucracy down. We'll see.
I don't know. There's some vultures that are swimming around Trump. I mean, Nikki Haley is floating around Trump. Mike Pompeo is floating around Trump. Meaning, if Donald Trump is going out there screaming to the Arab community that he's a man of peace, as he calls himself, and the campaign ad that he just released basically is calling Kamala Harris a warmonger, that they want to keep the wars going and everything else. Having Mike Pompeo around you, the man who said he lied, cheat, stole for a living, I mean, for the federal government, is not the guy who you want. I mean, that was the guy that murdered Soleimani. And then, I mean, all of these people are just neocons. If you had to evaluate Donald Trump's foreign policy, what would it be?
I think he is a businessman at top part, and he understands right now that going to war does not benefit anybody but this top elite crowd. I think that he understands right now. He does not. I think the good and the bad news about having a grandpa in the Oval Office is that he's more sentimental. I think he sees people don't realize this in 2016, any soldier that came back, whether it was accidental of our own, that came back, he would meet the families at the airport when they were bringing the casket in if they came through Washington, D.C. when he was president.
I didn't know that.
He would meet them, every single one. Normally Melania would be with him, but at the very least it was him. Luckily there wasn't that many under those 4 years, but he still made sure he met every single one of them. He does not like to see flag draped coffins, American coffins. He does not view these being the G.I. Joes like the neocons, that our sons and daughters are just G.I. Joe playthings for them to sacrifice. I think that ultimately, while some might look at war as a reason to re-stimulate the economy, like we saw post-World War I, post-World War II, we're not in that economy anymore. We're not in that state anymore. I think he truly believes that they're in an American first policy of coming back home and making sure that American businesses have the ability to thrive abroad, not abroad businesses thrive because of America. And that's,
I don't think many in America have realized it yet, but the rest of the world is leaving us behind. And the same thing with Europe, leaving Europe behind also. If you're looking out at the world, let's say if you're another country, you're not in America, and you see BRICS, for example, and you see Iran and Saudi Arabia come together. Now, obviously, they're coming together because BRICS is basically moderating them to come together. Both of you are going to be part of the organization. You do not be popping off at each other. China and India coming together, basically saying we're going to put our hostilities behind. We're going to figure out a way to solve it, etc. Meaning you have all of these other countries who are saying we're going to deal with each other as equals. None of this hegemon stuff, none of this unilateral stuff. And in the 80s, or even in the 70s, you could make this argument for this kind of America, the home of the brave, the free speech, liberty, etc. And that argument worked, especially against the Soviet Union as it was a repressive regime. Today, though, the argument leaves something to be desired, because today the argument is effectively between this is a multipolar world, we're equals, we're going to treat each other fairly, we're not going to engage in this kind of regime change wars or these color revolutions, we're going to have somewhat of peaceful relations between us, or at the very least try to. And then America says, but we're a hegemon. We're the hegemon. We're indispensable, which means by definition, you are dispensable to us. That argument is leaving something to be desired. And I suspect the reason why you have so many countries that are wanting to join BRICS and get into BRICS, or for that matter, that are ditching the dollar, it's because of that. And we don't seem to be aware of it. And the media in this country seem to have fully and completely ignored it. It is super bizarre.
It's ignored it mainly because they don't want to understand it. Because if they understand it, they're going to realize that they've been wrong in the past. There's one thing worse than Donald Trump to do: apologize for being wrong. Yeah. And they realize that all of this happened, they were led astray. But like I said, I'm going to have hope. If Jeff Bezos is keeping the Washington Post from endorsing, I have hope that other media outlets will eventually get onto this as well and realize that, listen, we need to take a step back, because we are getting a level of distrust for the media that is so wrong. When you have podcasts, yesterday I saw a statistic that Joe Rogan, I mean, we're having this whole big thing about Joe Rogan affecting an election, a podcaster that, I mean, he's good. He's great, but I've listened to more intellectually stimulating podcasts. He's good. He definitely talks about what the people want to talk about. But a podcast has more power of information than a nightly news broadcast on a mainstream television. I think people are starting to recognize we've got to readjust some things here. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 2012, I literally was making fun of podcasts, publicly making fun of podcasts. I'm like, you just go on a podcast. Now it's an honor. It's a huge resume builder to go on a podcast. And I think it's great. I'm love the idea that now everybody can have, once again, it goes to transparency, but it also speaks to the just absolute demoralization that has happened within the broadcast industry, that they're having to go to these non-traditional ways of getting information to the people.
1,000% agree. Good. Where is it? I'm sorry. 1 second.
I love it. I'm sorry. Bravo. Your audience.
I was going to say 1,000% agree with you. I'm sorry. I was trying to pull up your thing in the calendar, and the calendar is just acting weird on me. Scotty, thank you for this. Always appreciate talking to you. Always enjoy these conversations. Scotty Nell
Enjoy the
Hughes.
last 5
She's a
days.
journalist, news anchor, and political commentator. She was a CNN commentator during the 2016 presidential election, often speaking up in support of Trump. She joined RT America, and she held the show there for several years, up until the point where sanctions got involved and did bad things to all of us. Scotty, deeply appreciate it. Thank you for
Today I get to
joining
be
me.
my natural self.
All right, so let's take a break. You guys are listening to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I'll be back in a moment. 1 second. There we are. Welcome back. My name is Jamal Thomas. I hope you guys are enjoying the show. Let's see. Give me 1 second. Make sure this is right. There we are. Yeah, my name is Jamal Thomas. Thank you for joining me. This is the Jamal Thomas Show, the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are digging the content. I've had some really good guests today, so shout out to Scotty, shout out to Daniel Lazar. I did not know Daniel was a subject matter expert on that until I hit him up and was like, hey, do you know anything about this? He was like, yes, I do. I was like, yes, excellent. That is how my excitement for the day, getting somebody who knows something about European politics. But look, if you guys are digging the show, give me a like. Hit that like button. That like button does amazing things. Hit the share button. Share it to anybody who you think may enjoy it. Hell, even if they may not enjoy it, share it to everybody. My objective is to grow. I want to be at 40,000 by Christmas. That is a lofty goal, but damn it, I'm going to make that goal and I'm going to set that goal. And hopefully all of us, God willing, can accomplish it together. So there's that. If you are really digging the content and you are a super fan, consider giving a super chat, or for that matter, PayPal or Patreon. All of those things help tremendously in order to keep the content going and keeping this show up and running. There are things that I want to do for the show. Expansion is just one of them. So definitely even $1 helps, as they say. Esteban Cillo will be up. I can't roll my R's. I've tried it and I can't do it. He will be up at 9:15 to talk about the situation on the ground in Lebanon. Fascinating things are taking place with the Lebanese conflict. Israel has been blowing shit up left and right. Oh, by the way, all super chats will be read. As long as it's not racist, sexist, bigoted, or anything like that, it will be read at the end of the show. So There's that. That is a pact I'm trying to make with my audience. Um, they have been on a killing spree as of late. So this over the last couple of 2 days, Israel kills 343 people in 7 attacks over like 3 days. One, I think it's called Belial or something like that. Belial built Layla. In that one, it was over 100 people that were killed at once, where they effectively leveled an apartment building. I think I have that clip. This right here. I mean, imagine you trying to go about your day and you know that you're fair game to be killed at any moment. And it's nothing that you did. You just so happen to be there. And Bill Clinton making this argument about, hey, man, they were just, the most moral occupiers ever. And Hamas didn't like them, even though they wanted to live in harmony. Well, occupying, there is no such thing as a benign occupier. There's that. And on top of that, again, let's stop acting like this stuff happened on October 7th, or for that matter, that it didn't precede Hamas. I mean, we're talking about a brutal regime that has been there for decades. And it's not like Hamas came out of nowhere, meaning it's not like, it was 11 light and all of a sudden out popped Hamas. That's not the way it worked. Whatever you want to think of Yahya Sinwar, yes, he was a hard and brutal man, but he didn't become hard and brutal out of nowhere. All of this stuff is happening within a context. And yes, until you deal with that, you're not dealing with anything. I can't. I've had conversations with Benjamin Netanyahu's, I think, press guy. He came on the show once. And when you're having those conversations, it is the weirdest thing in the world because you're talking to somebody and it comes across like you're in an alternate reality. Because the honest to God truth that it's clear as the brimming light of day, you are running an apartheid state in an open air ghetto. Why do you think the people there will be happy and content to live in that situation, especially considering you treat them and act as if they're not even human beings? Why do you think that? And as I was pointing to him, I was like, you realize that until you deal with that issue, nothing else changes. It seems that they believe that they can kill their way to a solution. If we just kill enough, if we can just terrify them enough, we can cow them enough, we can make them so terrified that they just coddle in the corner somewhere and leave us to our devices and allow us to enjoy their territory without any kind of threat or harm to us. Why do you believe that? Well, I don't know why they believe that. Nevertheless, they're going to try it. And they're doing their damnedest to kill their way through, to try to kill their way to the greater Israel. We'll see if that's going to work. I'm skeptical that it is. Hezbollah has shown no sign of letting up to this point. And as I've pointed out once before, Israel is a modern military with nukes. They have nuclear weapons. They have tanks. They have fighter jets. They have F-35s. They have the United States, the UK, Germany, meaning they have all of these rich nations supporting them and backing them to the hilt, giving them weapons, intelligence, etc. Hamas is just a resistance group that barely has anything. And yet, they're still there. And the reality of it is, for Israel to win, according to Netanyahu, you have to kill each and every one of them. There's that. In order to win against Hezbollah, you have to be able to beat them to the certain degree where you could put your people back in the north safely, which means you need to, on some level, take southern Lebanon. Now, you can destroy and kill a lot of people. You have air power and everything else. But the moment that they put those troops in southern Lebanon, their losses went up significantly. There's that. So, and Iran is a whole different animal. I mean, Iran has been able to show, in a defensive maneuver, by the way, Meaning, yes, they showed the propensity to be able to hit Israel anytime they wanted, at any particular place they wanted. If you think back, when the United States, the UK, Jordan, all of these countries came up in order to knock Iranian armaments out of the sky, Iran still hit Israel. Even then, the missiles hit. So it became clear as day that this notion of Israeli deterrence, because they have the Iron Dome and the Iron Dome can protect it from anything, well, that deterrence or that myth of invincibility went away almost immediately. When Iran turned around and hit them this last time, they were incapable of defending themselves. And that was Iran pulling their punches. So Israel said, we are going to strike back. We're going to use 100 jets. We're going to use F-35. We're going to have fueling in the sky. We're going to do all of these things, and we're going to punish you. We're going to dominate. That's what we're going to do. We're going to show you you can't mess with us. Okay. How did that go? Israel was able to get a factory or two, something to that effect. But from my understanding, there were no secondhand explosions, meaning secondary explosions, meaning they didn't hit anything that blew up something else, let's say like a bomb factory or something to that effect, the things that they use to make missiles. Apparently, they hit an old rocket system or anti-aircraft system. And apparently, there was something that happened to the S-300, but they don't necessarily know if anything hit it. It might have just been the firing of the rocket itself. Meaning, for everything that they were using, this is modest. Israel, if you've noticed, is being very quiet. Iran has been going around basically unbothered in that situation. Iran keeps saying that they prepared for an actor of the United States stature. Israel is a country of 8 million people. Iran's point is, we were preparing for a bigger enemy. Don't mess with us. Also, there's reporting that they had planned on a far more extensive attack, and they encountered air defense in a way that they had not intended at all, meaning they underestimated Iran's air defense capabilities. Now, whether that was because they were being upgraded by the Russians, whether that was because they just have better technology than the West realized, unknown. But what is known is that you can watch the video of that night and you can see Iran knocking stuff out the sky as it gets closer. Israel did not enter Iranian airspace, and apparently they flew through Jordan and through Iraq because they found themselves that they were being tracked by radar, by long-range radar. So the planes were vulnerable, even within the context of that attack. They weren't ready. And I guess my point is, you have not gotten rid of Hamas after a year. You're now embroiled in a land war with Hezbollah. You're trading fire with Iran, and Iran has shown itself to be your superior. And Yemen is still, every so often, lobbing missiles or creating some kind of submarine missile that they are now using to go after boats. This does not bespeak of success. The economy is in tatters. You have a ton of people who are leaving. And now that they're trying to implement conscription, even that has fallen flat, with only 4% showing up the service, meaning the ultra-Orthodox Jews. The question, I guess, is how long can they keep this up? How long can they keep this up? I don't have an answer for that. Deborah Wilson, thank you, Deborah Wilson. Leave a comment. I always like the comments. Let's see. Luca Clemente, I'll join 1,000 times more to help you reach 40,000. Oh, Luca, that's ballot stuff, and you can't ballot stuff. You can't ballot stuff, Luca. But fair enough. I appreciate the thought. Hell yes. Got that audio popping. The well-dressed nerd, Braves review. Brave man, if you would know how much I have busted my ass and how long I've been sitting here for hours going back and forth with the audio to try to figure out, okay, how does it sound when you do this? How does it sound when you do this? Test number 1, test number 2, test number 3. No, it took a while. I got to be honest, I was shocked at the level of headache that first week and how bad that first week went. I'll talk about a kick in the teeth. I had been doing I did YouTube for years before ever getting in the radio. And somewhere along the way, I got complacent at the point where I got into radio. And then I come back thinking, okay, everything is going to be the same and everything else. Nothing worked. The audio didn't work. Computer didn't work. All of that stuff was basically ancient, old, and not necessarily up to snuff. It took a bit to get this stuff together. But I did say the first week was going to be trial and error. And Lord knows it was. But so far, so good. And by the way, I appreciate all of you being with me on this journey. I do want to try to get to 40K. I've been at 30K for God knows how long, and I'm sick of being on laying on my back at 30K. So the objective is to grow. The objective is to improve, and that means the mechanics, and that means sharing content, being consistent, etc., etc., etc. So I appreciate all of the help that you guys add to this, and I appreciate the fact that our little family meets here 7 to 10 a.m. And my objective, my goal is to grow that little family at 7 to 10. I realize 7 to 10 is not necessarily the most opportune time. Not many people want to get up in the morning to listen to a show. I guess my thought was, if it's a radio show or anything else, there may be people who are up working, there may be people who are cleaning, there may be people doing some of anything. And in the context of that, what difference is it to turn on the YouTube channel, or for that matter, Rumble channel, or for that matter, any other channel? That's the thought. But look, let's take a quick break because it is time for my next guest. You guys are listening to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. We'll be back, I, singular, in a moment. Esteban, can you hear me? How's it going, man? Let me bring you in and give you an announcement. Let's see this. Give me 1 second. And we are back. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I am glad that you guys are with me, and I appreciate you guys being with me. Let's see. There was another one asking if I'm on Rumble. Yes, I am on Rumble, but I am not as diligent putting my items on Rumble. And I will read it once again at the very end as I do a redo of all the chats that were sent. So I want to bring in our guest, Esteban Cillo. He's a Beirut-based Ecuadorian journalist and current editor for The Cradle. He was previously with Tele Sur English. Esteban, man, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. How you doing this morning?
Hi, Jamal. I'm doing good. How about you? How's everything over there?
So far, so good. Are you safe? And I know I always ask you that because, well, of the maniac bombing that seems to be taking place in Lebanon. I just want to make sure you're good.
Yeah, I'm okay. I always keep safe, thankfully. But the situation always just keeps worsening every single day.
Oh, that's right. You're in Toronto. Let me ask you this. There is a fascinating development that seems to be taking place. Hochstein, this is a former IDF soldier. He's a dual citizen. This is the one that Joe Biden has decided to use as his envoy.
Yes.
He has gone with, I guess, I call it a surrender document. Now, this took place, I guess, a couple of weeks ago. And he goes to Lebanon and is saying, effectively, in order to end the conflict, we need to be able to have operations in southern Lebanon. Basically, we need to be able to take and operate here in southern Lebanon. This is basically ceding territory in that sense. And we will stop the terror bombing. Otherwise, we will continue the terror bombing. Now, part of the thought of this plan is to somehow isolate Hamas. That if you can get a deal with the Lebanese government, either to get the Lebanese government to get the Lebanese military to fight Hezbollah, which is mind-blowing to me, but that would imply, if they make a deal like that and they send their own Lebanese troops to it, that they will be working with Israel to fight Hezbollah. Let's start there for the moment. Is there any chance of Lebanon accepting that deal? And the reason why I ask, is there any chance of them accepting the deal? Because the president, Mitzia, I believe, or Mitzia, correct me, I'm butchering his name. But he said once before that, look, we will accept the UN deal where we will put troops in the South. And when he said that, I thought to myself, well, that's a civil war. What are you talking about? Now, that was before the bombing started. And I guess the question is, now that the bombing has started, is there any chance of him, I suppose, joining arm in arm with Israel to go after Hamas? Because if he signs the deal, I would imagine on some level he's ceding territory, and it is unclear what other provisions are in that deal. What are your thoughts? What's going on?
Well, I think you're correct, first of all, in calling it a surrender deal, because this is not truly about a ceasefire, right? It's the same thing as Gaza, in which Israel wants to continue waging war. Israel doesn't want to remove troops. It doesn't want to allow civilian control of the strip or security, or handback security control, etc. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. They come with a deal that is a surrender, or we will just continue to bomb your country because we can, right? The Israeli Air Force is advanced, as advanced as the U.S. Air Force, because, well, one and the same at the end of the day, right? So when a Hochstein comes with this surrender deal, as far as the political sphere in Lebanon, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for them to accept it. But they have absolutely no leverage, really, over Hezbollah, right? Like, how are they going to get Hezbollah to hand over their weapons, to lay down their weapons, to move behind the Litani River? The Lebanese army is an army that is not capable of fighting a war at all. You can try to spark a civil war, but again, the forces that exist in Lebanon that would oppose Hezbollah, they are not capable enough. They are not numerous enough. They don't have enough weapons, right? Like we can always, consider that the U.S., as they have done times before, they can just start like funneling weapons. The U.S. embassy essentially controls Lebanon. The U.S. ambassador is the true, is the power behind the power in Lebanon, as is the case in many other countries. And she recently, apparently in a meeting, this was reported in Arabic media and local media, that in a meeting with members of the opposition, so to speak, not really, right? Just like the people who are sided with the U.S. Because you can't call that an opposition when the government's also sided with the U.S., right? Hezbollah is not in control politically of the country. But in a meeting with these leaders, she said Israel cannot finish this war alone. It's time for you to do your part. So you see, the U.S. ambassador is already, taking the position of you have a foreign army bombing your country, killing your children, killing your women, destroying civilian infrastructure, destroying ancient cities, right? The city of
Yeah.
Tyre, the city of Baalbek, cities that have stood for thousands of years, since before biblical times, are being destroyed as we speak by the Israeli army, and you want, you you have so much arrogance and so much ignorance. Let's be honest, as a U.S. Official,
Ambassador.
to come and say, it's time for you to rise up and fight on the side of the people who are doing this. At some point, you need to
That's
also
amazing.
understand that people have dignity, right? Like, you can only be pushed so far, and at this point, the only people who are standing up against a regime as bloodthirsty and as genocidal, and that really truly the worst acts that we have seen in decades
Yeah.
being committed by this regime. The only people standing against it are the resistance factions, are Hamas, are Hezbollah, are the Yemenis, the Iraqis, Iran to I guess more distant extent, I would
Right.
say. Like, obviously not like a boots on the ground fighting face to face. And so far only launching retaliations, right? Not actually coming in and being like, no, we're going to actually wage war against you.
Right.
And then you have the entirety of the West on the other side. You have the entirety of the West, like doing genocide apologia, doing, trying to convince the native population of Lebanon to rise up and start fighting a war in the name of their own enemy, of their own butchers. And but as I said, with Lebanon in particular, it matters to understand that the government it's controlled by the U.S. embassy, right? There's no question about that. The army depends on the U.S. government. They depend, to pay salaries for soldiers, for Lebanese soldiers. The
Yeah.
Lebanese depends on handouts, right, from the U.S., from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, from France. At some point, they even depended on food rations from Jordan to feed their soldiers. Just to
Wow.
give you a picture of how really, like, abandoned, I guess would be the right word, the national force in Lebanon is, and also why there is a need for Hezbollah, right? No matter what you think about them, no matter what you think of, they're terrorists or they're freedom fighters or, whatever, these are native Lebanese defending their
Yeah.
land at the end of the day.
Well,
Just
I
like
guess for
our,
me,
our
it's less about
nationals
what I
defending
think of
their land.
Hezbollah. It's more
Yes.
about what the Lebanese people think of Hezbollah. What is the point of view of the Lebanese on the ground? I mean, and I guess let's break this into two parts. Before the fighting, meaning before Israel started going on the genocidal killing murder campaign, and after they went on the killing campaign, how does the public on the ground view Hezbollah? If there was like a poll taken before and after, what would it be?
I think before you would find more division, right? Hezbollah has always been that force in Lebanon that is blamed for everything, right? Anything that happens in Lebanon is Hezbollah's fault. It's the fault of their weapons, the fact that they are, like a state within a state.
Yeah.
When the port explosion happened, remember the Beirut port explosion? Within minutes, it was blamed on Hezbollah. You had Saudi media, you had a U.S. allied Lebanese media saying, "Oh, it was Hezbollah weapons in the port." Absolute falsehood, absolute, a fabrication. When the economy collapsed, they blamed it on Hezbollah. If the roads flood, they blame it on Hezbollah. It's the scapegoat. It's always the scapegoat there. So when you build that through the decades, there's going to be opposition. There's going to be strong opposition, right? Just look at I always something that because I'm from Latin America, right? I'm from Ecuador, and over there we have the same kind of strategy, right? Like always, whenever something bad happens, it's the fault of the political parties that oppose the U.S., right? That stand on the other side. It's always their fault. Like anything happens, it's not the fault of the government. If it's a U.S.-backed government, it's always the fault of the opposition. And here is the same script, right? The only difference is that Hezbollah is not. I mean, it is a political party, but it's more an armed group, right? It's more like that's kind of their primary position.
Mhm.
But still, right? So that's before the war, right? I would say the opposition would be probably somewhere like 60-40, maybe, right? Like 64
Okay.
Hezbollah, 40 against it, give or take. I would say now it's lower than that, right? Like, I mean, more lower opposition.
Against it.
Exactly, because these, as I was saying, these are indigenous Lebanese fighting for their land. This is not, Iranian invaders. This is not IRGC soldiers in the south of Lebanon, or North Korean troops in Ukraine or whatever. This is doctors, lawyers, paramedics, teachers, shop owners, you name it. You name it. Who are part of Hezbollah, who pick up weapons and who go in to fight against an enemy that is destroying their land, that is trying to take over their land and kill their people. So right now, if anything, and I think you can see it in the political sphere, right? And the fact that Lebanon has been under a lot of pressure for the past month and a half for a civil war to spark, and that how that's been kind of rejected in many ways, even like in the political commentary. Like you have stations, right? Like in Lebanon, there's a station called MTV that is like truly the worst. Trying to justify their attacks, but even the people are kind of turning against them. They're turning them into memes. They're turning them, they're not taking them seriously anymore, because at some point reality is just too clear, too present, too harsh to deny, right? Like you can blame Hezbollah's weapons for everything until U.S. weapons begin destroying your own country.
Right.
And begin killing your own people. And then all of a sudden, well, you're not so angry about Hezbollah's weapons.
I am super curious about the thing. So I remember having a conversation with Laith one time in a meeting. And, Laith knows the Middle East extremely well. I mean, Laith could be a guest himself. Like he knows that stuff left and right. In fact, I think he even speaks Arabic. And I was telling him, like, I can't believe that the Muslim states and the Arab states are allowing Arabs to be slaughtered like this without getting involved. And even when I was implementing Iran, he was like, well, Iran doesn't count. I was like, what do you mean Iran doesn't count? They're still Muslims. And then he goes into the politics between Shia and Sunni. And my thought was like, yeah, that division may make sense outside the context of fighting taking place where an enemy is killing other Muslims. That part blew me away. I could not wrap my head around this idea that you have all of these Gulf states and nobody cared in real terms. And Iran was the only one that gave tacit support. I mean, they responded after they were attacked. But it seems that Iran, a few things seem to have taken place. This invincibility of Israel is a myth. It doesn't exist. Iran, Hezbollah, they have been able to hit Israel, and Israel has been incapable of entirely defending itself, especially against Iran. From the standpoint of Israel trying to go after Iran, it became clear that Iranian air defense is somewhat of a beast. And it was able to knock down the overwhelming majority of Israeli attack and apparently keep track of Israeli planes at a long range so those planes could never invade Iranian airspace. What is the word on the ground, and what are the other people saying now that Iran has been able to demonstrate dominance in the region to such a degree?
I think, for people on the ground, this is more concerning than anything else, right? Like, seeing, because at the end of the day, what Israel wants is war with Iran. It has been apparent for a while now. To each other, they are, kind of like the final boss, right? Although I guess for Iran, really, is more the U.S. is the final boss. For the rest of the world, really, right? Like for the new multipolar world that is forming. So I think that there's a lot of concern, right? That there's no de-escalation. That we are only seeing more and more steps taken towards a larger war. I think Israel, their retaliation was surprisingly measured. Given especially the way that we know the Israeli army operates. Like you only need to look at Gaza and you only need to look at Lebanon to see that there's no red lines.
Well, to be fair, sorry to interrupt. To be fair, I don't think they were trying to have it measured. I mean, if you look at, like, I was watching the video when it was taking place, and Israel is saying it used 100 airplanes. It was going after all of these facilities, including missile batteries. And what it seemed like they were doing is try to go in waves where they would take out the missile batteries and then come back and hit the areas they wanted to hit in Tehran. And it seems
Yeah.
that the air defense effectively didn't allow them to do it. So it seemed like they wanted to do a bigger attack. They just didn't have the capability of doing it with the force that they had at their disposal. They were shocked by the capability of the Iranian Air Force.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though. I could be wrong.
I think, like what I mean by measured is that they didn't bomb, like the nuclear sites, and they didn't bomb the oil facilities, and they didn't bomb hospitals or like schools,
Right.
etc. That's what I mean by measure, right? When I say measure, I mean they targeted military facilities, which is very unlike what we have seen from Israel over the past year, and even more. So that's what I mean. But you're right. They tried.
Forgive me for interrupting again. I'm sorry. But if they wanted, because I got to be honest, that confused me a little bit. The strike confused me a little bit. If Netanyahu wanted a war, a wider war, why not bomb the missile sites? Why not bomb those things? Hell, for that matter, why not do a second bombing campaign? Natalie Bennett is basically saying, yeah, we need to do another attack on Iran. Meaning, if they wanted to really go all in and force Iran to lose its mind, and look, Iran still may attack. We don't necessarily know. Why not go further in on that attack?
I think, it's probably one side of it's probably the U.S., right? Like we often talk about how like the U.S.-Israel relationship is like the tail wagging the dog.
Yeah.
I think in this case, there likely was a lot of pressure from the U.S. to really not, go completely ballistic against Iran, and do it in a more smart, measured approach. Take out their air defenses. Israeli officials are saying now that Iran is essentially naked, that their air defenses are gone. The Iranians are actually admitting to significant damage to their military size, right? At the beginning they did, they like, as you would in any war, you play it down. You're like, oh, my enemy didn't do any damage. But then a few days later, even Khamenei came out and said, we cannot play down the damage. It wasn't as bad as it could have been, but that doesn't mean they didn't hit parts that I don't know, like they caused damage.
Yeah.
And so I believe obviously the truth somewhere in between the two sides of how this is being described. And I think also, you need to look at what Israeli officials were saying in the afternoon, particularly the most extreme elements of the Israeli government, like the national security minister, who came out and said, when critics obviously came out and said, like, what was that? Like, again, you don't actually go and destroy Tehran. And he comes out and he says, well, this is the first step. He described it as something like that, like the first step, the first stage. We're going to come back after. And now you're hearing there's noise in Israeli media that there might be a preemptive strike against Iran. They just like use words, like change the meaning of words completely.
Yeah.
Because Iran is going to retaliate. They have said it already, and they said it before. We'll see how it takes shape, the retaliation. I would imagine it has to be bigger, it has to be stronger than the one we saw last time. But Israel now is counting on it, I would say. I think Israel is really counting on it. It's also one of the reasons why we're hearing so much about now we have achieved what we wanted in the south of Lebanon, which, in all honesty, I don't even know what that means. What have they? I mean, they've destroyed a lot, like they did in Gaza, but the settlers are not going to be able to return to the north of Israel. Like, it's not anymore safer for them.
Right.
And so it's probably related to that, right? To like this idea that now we again need to refocus and go and fight this war in Iran, which I don't know how it's going to take shape, in all honesty, because they're not close. These countries are not close. You have Syria, you have Iraq in the middle. Israel could do, an air campaign. And because Iran cannot, like Hezbollah or Hamas or any other countries in the region, they cannot meet Israel in the air. Israel has the advantage in the air. But then again, an air war doesn't really get you anywhere, right? Like, it destroys, yes, but it doesn't give you anything. It doesn't.
Right.
You actually, you do not take control of anything. You just wanton destruction. But then at some point, that's kind of what it feels like the Israeli aim is, right? Just like destroy as much as you can, kill as many people as you can, and wait for the U.S. election, which has been kind of like this kind of like a goalpost that we have had since the attacks of October the 7th of last year. So we are gonna, there's no de-escalation anymore at this point. I
But
also,
I
when
don't
you
know how Israel can keep this up, to be honest. In fact, just to make my point, I want to play Gallant. So, Israeli Defense Minister, I don't know if this was a press conference or what, but I want to get your take on this clip. He is effectively saying, look, this is not a military solution. That being able to kill everybody is not the end all be all in regards to, how we operate. And I want to get your take on why he's saying it, because I have I'm gonna give you my hypothesis on why I think he's saying this, and I don't think it's the hostages, to be bluntly honest. Let's see this, and this is that right? Gallant is number 5, I believe.
Be achieved through military operations alone. Power is not the essence of it. Not all objectives can be achieved through military operations alone. Power is not the essence of everything. To realize our moral and ethical duty to bring our hostages home, we will have to make painful concessions.
All right. So he is talking about in order to bring the hostages home. Now, I would argue that this is not really about the hostages. And the reason why I say that, there's another clip of Gallant where he's talking about the conscription law. The Cradle covered this. And he effectively says, in a nutshell, yeah, I am for the conscription law. It's a moral and security issue. And he was like, we've had more people injured. And unfortunately, we had more people to die. And especially with the expanded fronts. So we've expanded the fronts. There are more people that we're fighting now. We've expanded out, trading forces with Iran. We've been fighting Hezbollah. We've been fighting the Hamas for the past year, not to mention the Houthis ever so often, lobbing missiles. So yes, we have taken casualties. We have a lot of people who have died. And so we need to deal with it. So there's that. So right off the bat, the casualties is one. Then there was another article that came out. This one is called Dissent in the Mighty IDF, Regular Fighters No Longer Willing to Fight, Silence and Silent Disobedience.
Yes.
And what this article goes into is effectively what the soldiers are going through in the conflict. Oh, that doesn't work. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Is that work? Is that right? Is that right? Hold on. Okay, yeah, that doesn't work right. All right, what the soldiers are going through in the conflict, effectively saying they're depressed, they continuously go back and forth to the same areas. So they would clear an area, then have to go back to the area, then have to go back to the area, and how it's wearing on the mentality of the soldiers, how the soldiers are defecting, basically saying, not going back, telling other soldiers not to get involved. Basically, that it feels aimless, that there's no end to the conflict.
Yes.
And, CNN even ran a piece where CNN was talking about, well, they tried to act as if woe is the Israeli soldier, woe the Nazi, in a sense.
Woe the Nazi
And
army.
the guy who they were talking about killed himself. And they're making it like this heartfelt case. The guy in the story that they even mentioned was running over human beings in a bulldozer that were still living, and talks about how blood is gushing out of them and it wrecked them and screwed them up. Even in the article, they talk about how people are not right in the head. Either they're physically injured or, for that matter, cognitively damaged from the fighting that they've been doing. And I would wager the murdering and the killing of women and children that they've been putting forward. I have to believe that some of them have a conscience, and those people are being affected by that conscience. Meaning, the long-winded thing to say, but that Gallant's argument here has everything to do with him having an appraisal that they are losing people. They need additional manpower, hence the ultra-Orthodox, and that the soldier and the military and the army is damaged. I mean, they've been fighting for a year. And not just fighting for a year, you're talking about an army that is meant for these kind of quick fights. They're still fighting. They continue to fight, and there is no end mark in place. Gallant has pointed out that it's aimless, and he apparently had this kind of fight with Netanyahu saying we need to reorganize and reevaluate what we want. And you heard in that speech, we will have to make painful concessions if we want to get the hostages back. I guess my point of view is it's not just the hostages. What is your thought? That's a long-winded way. That's a lot of wood to chop. But give me your thoughts on that.
I think is like what Galant is talking about. It's exactly what you described. First of all, the aimlessness of the war, right? Like Yoav
Yeah.
Galant has been for a while now. I hate to say the voice of reason because we are talking about people committing genocide, but
Ish.
amongst the people committing genocide, he has to some degree been the voice of like this is not gonna be how we win this war,
Right.
and on the other hand, he's also the man who called Palestinians in Gaza human animals, and we need to go and
Exactly.
wipe them out. So take his words with a grain of salt. So, but it's because of the really again the aimlessness of the Netanyahu government, right? Of the political sphere, that
Right.
is just just bomb, destroy buildings, kill civilians. Do all of these things in Gaza, in Lebanon, and to take control of the land. No day after plan, no end game, just wanton destruction.
Wow.
And Galant is kind of like okay, we can do this for a year, I guess, but now we need to find a way to get our
It's
soldiers.
been a year. It's been a
Exactly,
year.
it's been a year.
I guess one thing.
Yeah, and then
Like,
on the other hand, is also
let me
what
ask
you
you
were
this: what is
describing,
going
right?
on internally in Israel itself? Because that's a lot. That's a lot of this, right? Like, even if I consider this to be existential for Israel, because if you have a huge number of people leave, if the economy, just bottoms out,
Exactly.
if you
I
have
mean,
a
remember,
situation where people don't
Jamal,
want to
that
come back because they don't think it's safe,
the Israeli
then
army
how is
there.
Israel going to maintain itself?
Yeah, that the Israeli army, the base, the soldiers of the Israeli army, most of them are reservists, and the reservists
Yeah,
are also the workforce. So you have your workforce
yeah,
fighting a
yeah.
genocidal war for a year, your economy going down the toilet, which that's also I feel like something you also need to take with a grain of salt, because remember, Israel, at the end of all of this, they're gonna get all of the money in the world to rebuild, to reconstitute, to grants and etc. Like the money is just gonna flow for them, right? Like they are not Lebanon, they're not Ecuador. They will get a cash incentives, but the damage that they're doing also to the soldiers, like you're saying, right? Like at this horrible CNN piece, like doing woe is me, the Israeli soldier who drives a bulldozer over living beings
Yeah,
and can't eat meat because
yeah,
of course at some point that when you're killing women, children, babies, old people, executing them. Also one thing, it's just like a little parenthesis here. There's something I often like to point out, and it's like when you see the death toll currently in Gaza, right? Because the death toll has been around 40,000 for like 3 months now,
I
right?
don't
Like
buy that
4
number.
months. It doesn't
Yeah, I
it
don't.
doesn't go up that much. You need to keep in mind that this death toll is the bodies that the Gaza civil defense has been able to recover, right? The bodies that have reached hospitals and they have been able to count.
Right.
What Israel's doing is they're driving over the bodies of the dead bodies and also living people with these giant
Bulldozers.
tractors, these giant machines, essentially destroying them. You will never be able to recover that body. They're using weapons that vaporize human beings, as you saw in the attack of on the hospital in North Gaza.
Yeah,
When this kid burnt alive with the IV drip attached to
yeah,
him. They're using
yeah.
white phosphorus, which also, burns anything down to cinder. There's a reason why there's so many child amputees currently in Gaza, because the weapons and the explosions that they cause, they are meant to shred people, right? To tear human beings to shreds. So when you see the death toll stick at 40 something thousand, it's not because there's no more deaths, it's simply because there's no more bodies.
Wow.
Bodies cannot be recovered. So when you do that, when an army that is doing that, at some point, at least some of them are going to get a little damage, right?
Yeah,
Like when you do this day in and day out. So I think this is also the angle that Galant is taking when talking about that, like, military action is not really going to take us to the end of all of this. So we'll it's just kind of inevitable at this point, right? It's inevitable that Israel needs to find an off-ramp for themselves, for their economy, for their own population, for their own even the political standing across the world. Although I don't know, like at this point, Israel is still a UN member state, no sanctions lobbied against them, barely any arms embargo. Germany was
Yeah.
recently, German officials were recently in hot water for even considering doing reducing arms weapons to Israel. The Western world has truly become complicit in this genocide. We no longer can call it just an Israeli genocide. This is a U.S., UK, German, Israeli genocide.
Well, primarily U.S. because we're the one that's giving it diplomatic cover and everything else.
And
I mean,
and the weapons.
Germany is ridiculous. They always get it wrong. If Germany is backing you, you're probably doing something wrong.
Exactly.
I mean, they're just forever on the wrong side of history. No, I feel like we're culpable for this. I mean, our tax dollars. I mean, I was showing this article earlier. 70% of this war is paid for by the U.S. 70% of all of the killing and the slaughtering and the rivers of blood are paid for by our tax dollars in the United States. That is utterly ghastly. And then Kamala Harris is going to say, "Can we please have your vote?" Yeah, good luck with that.
The other guy would be worse, right? That's what they say.
Where do you think this is going? I mean, Iran has seemed to do any and everything in its power to prevent a war, meaning for all of the talk about Iran being a terrorist state, they have been the pragmatic state in the whole thing. And they have done any and everything in their power. Even the first few attacks was in order to try to regain balance of deterrence. They didn't necessarily go overboard, even in this latest attack. They didn't go overboard. We're going to hit weapons facilities and military bases, but that's it. And we're going to stop if you stop. If you escalate, we escalate and stop. So it's like they always escalate and stop and see what happens. Escalate, stop, see what happens. This is a tit for tat thing. Do you really believe, though, that they're going to look? I know they're talking about responding, but I don't know. I guess my thing is them downplaying this attack. Yes, there's a military reason for them to downplay it. But I thought part of the reason they may downplay it also is to get an off ramp. Like, you didn't touch us. You didn't touch us at all. So we don't even see the need to respond because you didn't touch us. Now, I know they hit a factory or two, but the damage didn't seem to be all that extensive. By the same token, like you said, they could be downplaying that. But if they're downplaying it, they have to be downplaying it for a reason. Is this their way of getting on the off ramp? And I guess the other question is Israel even going to let them stay on the off ramp?
I don't think so. I don't think Israel is willing to give up what it feels like. It's kind of like their it's their moment in a way to start this war. Iran is the source of all evil, right, in the West. But in reality, it's a country that has to adhere to international law. They have to. They must, right? When you have Israel acting like a mad dog, like a psychopathic nation, you know that they do it because they don't have to adhere to international law, because they will never face sanctions, because they will never, like everything I just mentioned. But Iran does, because Iran is under sanctions, because Iran is partnered with, with nations that don't want this war either. I don't think it would be very far-fetched to consider that that Russia wants this war to start, or that China wants this war to start. They have been trying diplomatic means as well. Although in my own view, I feel like if Russia, China, and Iran also, to some extent, they could have done more after a year of genocide. Even on the political sphere, I feel like they really could have done more, and particularly Russia and China. But in any case, that's not where what we're discussing right now. But as far as Iran goes, they need to
go into that.
These alliances.
I mean, because that's a fair point. I mean, like I said, I've been shocked that we've all been just watching on our TVs, on our laptops and computers or phones, just slaughter. I mean, just stuff that you haven't seen in movies going back for the last 60, 70 years. Just grotesque stuff.
Because when we talk about,
does the UN have any capability to do anything? Like, for example, could the UN expel or suspend Israel from being a UN member? What would Russia and China do? I mean, they went through the UN Security Council, and of course, the UN basically blew it off. And then when they finally got a resolution through, the US said, well, this is a non-binding resolution, meaning they wouldn't even accept the Security Council resolution, meaning they destroyed all of these institutions that we spent time building after the Second World War. And for what? For Israel, or for that matter, for Ukraine? Well, what would China and Russia do? differently if they wanted to lend, I guess, more political weight short of something of a war?
Well, well, first of all, what can the UN do? The UN can't create a country like Israel, right?
Oh,
the
there's
UN,
that.
the UN has the power to create a nation that is turning the world upside down. So I
Yeah.
guess they do have some power. Second of all, as far as Russia and China, you can always expel an ambassador. You can always remove an embassy. Bolivia
Yeah.
did it. Colombia did it. You can end, a trade. You can end. You can impose sanctions, right? Like Russia can
Sure.
impose sanctions. China can impose sanctions. We have seen them do it. They do it to the U.S., right? Like Iran. Iran also imposes sanctions. They do it to the U.S. as well.
Yeah.
But you can do these things. Like if a country like Bolivia, if a country like Colombia, if a country like even Spain, right, has taken more steps. And if they can do this, then of course countries of the size, of the magnitude, of the
Russia,
weight
China.
of a Russia and a China, they could also do this, but they choose not to. And I think that that's something that we have to also keep in mind, right?
Mm.
And like any nation, they have their own internal decision making process. Even Iran, right?
Yeah.
Like when we talk about how is Iran going to retaliate, why isn't Iran doing more? Because they need to decide for themselves, like any
Yeah.
other nation must.
Yeah.
That's how we should also look at it. But we can never forget that okay, Russia and China, they talk about the two-state solution, right? Like this
Right.
is their constant. A two-state solution is never going to happen. It's never
Yeah.
going to happen. And it's not
Tough
just
point.
because the Palestinians don't want it, because I feel like at the end of the day, especially after everything that's happened, it's probably that the Palestinians would find themselves at some point more willing to accept such a thing than the Israelis. That the Israelis are the ones who would really never 100%
Yes.
allow this to happen. They
Agreed.
even out loud it in the Knesset earlier this year. They voted to ban the possibility of an independent Palestinian state. This is what
Hmm.
in Gaza. This is what they're doing in the West Bank. What they've been doing, taking the land and destroying the infrastructure and killing people and arresting them. Israel is never going to allow for a two-state solution. So
Oh, I'm
Russia
sorry, real quick before I have to
is
let you
really
go.
empty.
UNRWA. What does it mean that they have basically destroyed UNRWA? I mean, they're basically outlawing it. They made the UN like a terrorist body or something to that effect. What is it going to mean for the Palestinians there? And for that matter, do you think they're going to be able to accomplish the objective of this? What did they call it? The general's plan, basically expelling or exterminating all of the Palestinians that are in the north of Gaza. Do you think they're going to be able to accomplish it? And this is going to be the last question.
Uh, I mean, there's no stopping them. We have seen for a year that there really is just no stopping them, even with the resistance with Hezbollah, with the Yemenis, with the
Mm.
Iranian attacks. These people are carrying out their final solution with the
Yeah,
full support of the West, with the
yeah,
full, complete, unwavering support of the Western nations. So no, it's very unlikely that you will see, Israel slam on the brakes all of a sudden.
yeah,
So they are going to continue doing what they're doing. As far as UNRWA, it's just another nail in the coffin, right? And not just of
yeah,
the UN agency, of Palestinians, for Palestinians, of Palestine, of of the people, of the survivors of the Nakba, because when Palestine was taken away from them by the UN, by the UK, and by the Zionist, settlers, militias that came to take the land, what the Palestinians got in return was UNRWA, right? Your country in exchange for a humanitarian agency. And now what Israel has done is essentially taken that away as well. So at this
yeah.
point, they are abandoned. They are completely abandoned. In the north of Gaza, the genocide is going at a degree that we have, industrialized now at this point. In the south of Gaza, it's probably going to come soon enough. In the West Bank as well, in occupied East Jerusalem, they are left without recourse. And UNRWA is also one of the highest. They employ I think they are the agency that employs the
Largest
most
employer.
Palestinians in the occupied territories. So it's just multi-layered. This destruction. This is intent to kill an entire population. This is ethnic cleansing, and we're seeing it happen, and nobody's doing anything to stop it.
Esteban, I'm sorry, I lied. One last thing. I want you to respond to Bill Clinton. So Bill Clinton came out, all of these people, I don't know if you're paying attention to the politics in the US,
A bit.
but because the Democratic Party is backing a genocide, then they have run into, let's say, a complication because now they have to convince people in their party who actually care about it. The Republican Party doesn't care. If you want to kill 2 million Palestinians, Republican Party is perfectly fine with it. Democrats, however, there's a segment of them that actually do give a shit. Now, you may have Democrats who virtue signal and oh, my heart bleeds for him. However, we got to get Kamala Harris elected. No, their issue are the people who are saying this is a red line. You're backing a genocide and you should not get a reward, a pat on the back with my vote to do so. It needs to be installed into stone for everybody, for any election going forward, that if you back a genocide, you will lose. You can back a genocide or you can run an election. You cannot do both. So Bill Clinton and Obama, all of these guys have been coming out trying to make arguments to convince people, hey, I know it's a genocide and I know a lot of people have been killed, but, and this is Bill Clinton giving you his but. That sounds horrible, but let me flip this over and this is Bill Clinton. I want you to hear what he says here.
Sure.
Because he's trying to excuse what has been taking place, and it's appalling. Come on, Bill. All right. That's Bill Clinton. Effectively, how would you feel if that was your homeland and they were super pro-Palestinian and they didn't do anything but just, be super pro-Palestinian?
It's it's the arrogance. It's just a level of arrogance from the Democrats in particular, because I feel like the Republicans, they're no better, but they're at least more straightforward, about their feelings, and at some point you have to give them that at least. But the Democrats are always acting, like they know better, like even to victim families, right? Like they're massacring your people, they're destroying your civilization, they're destroying your homeland, but we know better. We know better
Yeah.
about why it happened. And it's always, like it actually reminds me, it was Francesca Albanese, I think yesterday she was
Yep.
at the UN, and she was chastising officials and saying, you all read from the same script, Like you are incapable of showing any compassion, any empathy for Palestinians, and all you can do is repeat the same script of like, oh well, October 7, as if history started on October 7, just like showing a complete ignorance and complete disregard. And even if it had, right, even if the Israeli Palestine conflict has started on October 7 of last year, it's still a disproportionate response. It's still, bombing hospitals, schools, killing children, maiming children, leaving them orphaned, killing babies, not allowing humanitarian aid, in using starvation as a weapon of
Yeah.
war, etc., etc. Just like, and you still have the audacity, the arrogance to come at me in this way. As you're saying, this is, I think, at this point, and I am not from the US. I do not
Yeah.
vote over there. Sadly, the election will affect me as they do everyone around the world. But it's like at this point, like what you were saying is right. You cannot reward this kind of arrogance and
Behavior.
this kind of
No.
disregard for human life with a vote. You cannot, right? That doesn't mean like Trump is a better choice. It just means like realize that your nation is it benefits from war, it benefits from murder, and they want you to be part of it. They just want you to be
Yeah.
complicit. They just want you to be okay with it. Why? Because the orange man is worse.
Well,
How is that an
the
argument?
orange man has been running around saying he's going to end the war. Democrats are running
I
around
highly
trying to.
doubt that as well. I highly
Right.
doubt it.
No, really, this is the best that we can do, despite the fact we're paying 70% for all of it.
Exactly.
Esteban, man, thank you for joining me. Esteban Cillo. He's a Beirut-based Ecuadorian journalist, current editor for The Cradle. He was previously with Sir English. Esteban, man, thank you for this. I
Thank
really
you,
appreciate it.
Jamal.
Be
I'll
safe.
see you soon. Bye bye.
All right. We have come to the end of the show. Apparently, they were saying no sound. Believe it or not, there was sound. Bill Clinton was just very quiet, especially in the start of that video. He was effectively, I don't know, he's old. And the video is somewhat a light sound. So, but there was sound. There was sound. You just couldn't hear it. Look, guys, we come to the end. I want to thank all of you. I got to be honest, there's a lot of moving parts. And so this stuff goes by much faster than it did when I was at the studio. But I do want to thank all of you for joining me. Like it, share it, subscribe to it. Definitely hit the notification bell. I pop in at all times of the day, all times of the night. When real men can't sleep, real men do the news. And so 2 a.m. It's not that uncommon. This evening, I have Susan Pye. She's going to be here at 5 p.m., I believe. And she's going to have this conversation about the Virginia Purge law. The Virginia Purge law. I call it that. That the Supreme Court basically allowed to go through. And this one is, I got to be honest, I need to get more details on this one. I haven't entirely read into it. They're just talking about it as if this is for purely non-citizens, meaning we're eliminating non-citizens from the voter rolls, which I would think, well, why are they there in the first place, right? If you're a non-citizen, you shouldn't be able to vote. If that is indeed exactly what it is, my consternation goes down. My concern is that it's going to be beyond non-citizens, that non-citizen is a fig leaf in order to also eliminate people who are legitimate, who do have the right to vote. That's my concern. At least that was some of the stuff Republicans used to do before. We'll see. Susan Pye usually gives it straight down the middle. But before I go, I want to read, as I promised, Super Chats. Well-dressed nerd, Braves review. Thanks, Brave. Hell yes, got that audio popping. Yes, I got the audio popping. Join 1,000 times to help you reach 40,000. That would be stacking the ballot box, but Lord knows I appreciate your enthusiasm, Luca. Much appreciated. Deborah Wilson, thank you very much. Leave a post. I always like when people leave a post. Let's see. This one is Amir Ferrior. And also on Rumble, shout out Brave. Yes, I am on Rumble. I have not necessarily been the most attentive to Rumble. And this notion of the auto sync no longer works. But I better be on Rumble because I don't trust YouTube. So there's that famous last words. TC Super Sticker. I guess that is writing something, TC, but I was thinking more along the lines of a statement, a question, or a comment, but fair enough. Anastasia Beaverhausen, Deborah Wilson, love the show. Oh, Deborah Wilson said, love the show. Yes. Oh, thank you. That's her quote. That's her comment. Guys, thank you. I really appreciate you guys joining me. And like I said, if you dig it, give it a like, give it a share, give it a subscribe, share it far and wide. The best damn morning show, especially from the standpoint of news, commentary, politics, analysis, etc. You guys have a phenomenal day. I will see you all this evening. And if the evening falls through, I will see you bright and early in the morning. Have a damn good day, guys. See you soon. What just happened?